This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Donald Trump needs a weak dollar.
I didn't hear too many bullish cases for China in 2025.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Trump took steps on everything from TikTok to the southern border.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Yes, we'll play Pantera at the end of the hour for Lisa. She insisted on that. We say good morning. It is nuts right now. I got the Bank of England with a rate cut. Expected, sort of, kind of like I guess it's within the predictive tone here. I got cable under a 124, 123.71. I wish folks you could see what Matt Winkler invented with Tom Secunda. The earnings come out, and this is the terminal, the Bloomberg Professional Service, which gives me and Paul the privilege every morning of doing this. Paul, like 120, 150 headlines.
It's unbelievable.
Just came out. And Lisa has to memorize all of them. I see a first gray hair over there. Yep. Let's go right to the Dow component. Peloton. Forget about Amazon.
You're darn right.
Peloton.
I mean, they're cutting costs, but their sales continue to decline. So, I mean, it was, take a look at that stock price for Peloton. It was just ripping through the pandemic, and then we have the whole post-pandemic situation here. So, but we're still there. We've got the bike.
Oh, yeah,
we've got the treadmill. We're doing all the hiking, walking, and all that.
Three headlines in a row. Connected fitness subscribers. Yes. Are you a connected?
I'm a connected fitness subscriber.
There we go.
Yes, I am.
I am not. There's your Peloton report for this morning.
Yep.
We have an exceptional day, including moving to the afternoon, a conversation with the Secretary of Treasury of the United States, a very special moment for Bloomberg News. We'll bring that to you and tell you about it here through the show. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning, we're brought to you by IBKR with a percentage of the U.S. experiencing drought conditions exceed 18% on February 18th of this year. At IBKR Forecast Trader, it was recently 35%, 35%. What's your take? Trade your drought prediction at ibkr.com/forecast. Thanks to Interactive Brokers for foundational support of what we do here. So much. I got to go back and maybe I should become a connected fitness subscriber. Right now from the Interactive Brokers Studios, your Bloomberg Business Report, connected fitness subscriber, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. We've got futures right now. Little movement, but this is on the busiest day of earnings season getting underway. Wow. I am trying my best to keep up. All right, let's start with futures. So we'll go to NASDAQ futures down 0.2%, 47 points. Dow futures little changed, up 19. S&P futures little changed, up about a point. Want to head over to the yield space because the 10-year yield hovering near its lowest since mid-December. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said his focus to bring down yields rather than the Fed's interest rate. Be sure, tune in here, 1 p.m. Wall Street time. Treasury Secretary will join us live. So the 10-year yield, 4.43%, up 1 basis point. The yield on the 2-year, 4.19%, and that's up 1 basis point. With the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.3%. Want to point out, too, the British pound down 1% at 123.69 against the dollar after the BOE cut its key interest rate a 0.25 point to 4.5%. Now we move over to Honeywell, streamlining its portfolio, splitting into 3 independent companies. Pressure from Elliott Investment Management. It's also on the same day it reported earnings. Adjusted earnings per share beat estimates. Its forecast for 2025, though, profit fell short, and its shares are down 3%. Eli Lilly up 2%, 2025 adjusted EPS in line with estimates, but Bristol Myers down 2%, adjusted EPS below estimates. Then we go to Qualcomm. Their shares are off about 4%. Concerns about slowing smartphone growth. That's a big part of their business. And ARM Holdings down 4%. Cautious revenue forecasts adding to those concerns that spending on AI computing starting to slow. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much.
Lisa, you missed the Yum Brands. Yum Brands turned positive, driven by Taco Bell results. I can't believe you missed the taco. I'm a huge Taco Bell fan.
It's crazy.
Can I ask you a dumb question?
Yep.
I've never been in a door of La Belle de Tac.
Oh,
can you get a margarita at Taco Bell like you can at Chipotle?
No.
I don't.
No. This is kind of just fast food, but Taco Bell crushes it, I think.
I used to go over to 56th Street and just go have a margarita.
Yes.
And they're like, they want me to have a 6,000 calorie burrito chimichanga. They're like, no, I just want the margarita.
Exactly. All earnings across the board.
Yeah, we'll keep you up to date on the earnings here. And the answer is a lift to the market. And what I noticed yesterday, folks, I'm sorry, the 10-year real yield really made a move under 2%. It printed 1.99, which is a huge deal. It's come back a little bit right now. But the 10-year real yield, Amy Wu Silverman's got this tattooed to her brain, 2.0082, 2.01%. David Rosenberg with us in the 9 for an extended conversation. And right now for Global Wall Street, the conversation of the day, Amy Wu Silverman joins us from the Royal Bank of Canada, RBC Capital Markets. Amy, you take the 4 cross moments and you bring it into the dispersion in the market, the huge variance of opinions. How does one navigate the markets with such wide dispersion?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that folks have been noodling on, because when you do have high dispersion in the market, so meaning some stocks are going one way, other stocks are going the other way, you do have this effect of it kind of canceling out on the index level and making signals like the VIX look lower than I think we feel it ought to be, right? You have the close VIX hasn't even surpassed that 20, but we all feel the whiplash of those headlines. And part of the culprit for why it feels lower from a volatility perspective is that dispersion is so high. We don't have this big correlated co-move, particularly during earnings.
And now as we go into February, we have our Hobbesian double negative moment with Amy Wu Silverman. Amy, is it what I do in the market, or is what matter now what I avoid, what I do not choose to do?
You know, when you have these high dispersion environments, it really, really matters what you do. And, you know, my favorite stat about this is you could have the same level of VIX, Tom, you could have the same level of S&P drawdown, but in a high dispersion environment, if you made the right stock pick versus the wrong stock pick, you know, that outperformance differential could really be huge. It really matters if you're in the right sectors. It really matters if you're in the right stocks versus a high correlation environment where it's all macro, we're all riding one wave.
She's like the queen of active management. I mean, that's what we're talking about here.
Amy, there seems to be, you know, now we have President Trump back in office here. The headline risk seems to be back into this market. How do you suggest that investors hedge that? Should they hedge that? Should they not worry about it? Should they look through it? What do you say?
You know, look, first of all, I don't drive, but for some reason I really like driving analogies, and my volatility outlook was called watch out for potholes. And that's exactly what we're going to get. You know, when you have someone like Trump in power, we're just talking, there are these potholes you're going to get. It could be like an August 5th. It could be like a February 2018. You know, we got our fingers and toes crossed. But because of that, you know, I do think hedging makes sense. And simply because the positioning's gotten a lot more long after 2 consecutive 20+% S&P years, right? There's just more to hedge. And we do see that starting to climb up in the skew. In Tom's favorite word, the curve is you are seeing that hedging demand rise much more than it has in the past 2 years.
So I guess maybe one of the more recent headline risk has just been tariffs. Do your clients care about that? Do they think it's a risk? Do they kind of look through that and say, hey, it's just a negotiating tool. We're not going to worry about the economic impacts?
You know, it's so funny when we have these kind of macro client roundtables, the most surprising kind of anecdote I can tell you is clients just say that they believe Trump will manage the stock market. And obviously there's no sort of fundamental analysis there, but I can't tell you how many times I've heard that they just think the stock market will be okay, that this is all just part of a negotiation tactic. And that's another reason why I think you don't see these volatility potholes kind of priced out to these fatter left tails that you feel like they ought to be given the headlines. That, you know, that is anecdotally what investors keep telling me. I'm
reading Roger Altman as I try to get into the baseball season, one of his classic books from years ago. It's The Tigers, 1968, Norm Cash. Al Kaline, Amy Wu doesn't know what this is. But the answer is the baseball analogy, Amy Wu, that sort of like a batting average, 30% of the stocks go up and 70% don't really participate. Which way are we in that direction? Are we talking about fewer winners and more malaise, or the other way around?
I really think investors hope it's the other way around, and we've seen fits and starts of that, right? So particularly after the DeepSeek news, there was this question of if mega cap tech's going to keep holding us up. And when you saw that rotation, when that Monday that news came out, where did we go to? We went to all the breadth widening trades that have had fits and starts since last year. But I do think that's what investors still believe is their keystone for this market being healthy. Of course, mega cap tech has to be okay, Tom. It's just too much of a concentration not to be. But small mid cap or breadth widening trades, that's still what investors are really hoping for this market to be buoyed up to this year.
Amy, where do you see value in this market? I think some people, they're trying to get away a little bit from maybe the Mag 7 kind of concentration risk into this market, looking for maybe some value outside of that. Where do you guys see that?
So one thing that we've talked about as one of our pillars for hedging is because you have this index suppression, S&P hedging may not necessarily be your best bet. We have a lot of thematic baskets where we think that hedging differential makes a lot of sense. So, if you believe in IA versus you don't believe in IA, actually using those thematic basket differentials as hedges versus using your traditional tools like S&P.
Keep us out of suspense. I understand the New York Mets are a thematic basket, particularly after bringing Alonso on board. Give us an example, Amy Wu Silverman, of a thematic basket.
So we have a lot of them, and it's sort of, it's very driven by clients, but a good example is what stocks would benefit from AI continuing. They don't necessarily have to be AI specific names. They could be AI adjacent names like utilities. And then we have the opposite, right? We have your traditional cyclical baskets. When you look at that differential, Tom, in the weighted average implied volatilities, to me, that gives you a much better sense of where risk is right now than just purely using something like the S&P index. And we look at those differentials really closely because it gives us a sense much more of skew nowadays than just looking at the index level.
Okay, well, where's the value trap right now on a quantitative basis? When you look at the harmful, you got to hedge, and if you want to avoid a value trap, how do you study that, and what do you avoid?
I think what you avoid right now is getting trapped in the dispersion on that index level. So for instance, if you are thinking about a hedge right now, you may actually be better off with idiosyncratic hedges because of where dispersion is than using something like S&P or something that is much more going to benefit if you get a pickup in correlation. To me, that's the difference right now in this market. That wasn't true in a higher correlation environment. To me, that's the trick right now when you're thinking about hedging your portfolio.
Was that enough math? I mean, it's just
plenty.
like my brain is. What she just said there, let me translate it, folks. She said, use the Boston Red Sox as a hedge. That's what she said.
Amy, with the stock markets at or near all-time highs here, are you seeing downside protection? Are folks hedging some of their gains here?
They are. And to me, it's really interesting, right? Because if you look at the past 2 years, we were in this FOMO, YOLO market. Everyone was buying call options. But, the one distinction I'll tell you is it's really a dichotomy between what institutional investors are doing and what retail is doing. We're actually still continuing to see that bid to the right tail on the retail side. It's mostly the institutional investors that are now thinking more about protecting their portfolio. And then that goes back to what I had said earlier about, well, how do we protect our portfolios right now in a high dispersion environment? Do we use our traditional indices, or do we think much more sector and stock specific, use those thematic baskets? I don't know baseball at all, but I guess they're like the Boston Red Sox, but be much more specific about that in an environment where, some things are going one way and some things are going the other way.
When you see the 10-year yield come in, I mean, it's more like a Francis Donald question, but when you see the yield space come in and the somewhat exuberance within the cacophony of political news, including in Canada, Amy Wu Silverman, is this a bull market? And the answer is, I'm sorry, we're printing higher, it seems.
We certainly are. And, to me, it's one of those, it's going to be great until you get that volatility pothole, right? It's going to be great till you get that August 5th or that February 2018. But, the one thing I'll say about what Bessent said about targeting that yield versus targeting rates is we have to really be careful, Tom, about watching the rates versus equity vol correlations changing, because that's a relationship we've been counting on, just like bond equity correlation. But, when people start to kind of say we're thinking about this, then you have to watch that relationship, because if that breaks, we see a lot of other things breaking too.
Amy, nobody cares. All they want to know is Skylar Caruso over at People Magazine has Jason confirming Taylor Swift will be at the Super Bowl to support Travis. Okay, great. We have to remind everyone, Amy Wu Silverman dragged her daughter to see Taylor Swift. They were like
and screaming
in like row 6 or something.
Yeah.
I mean, Taylor was waving at him and all that. Give us a Taylor Swift update, Amy Wu Silverman. I mean, do you go with the Chiefs just because she's going to darken the door in New Orleans?
I guess, look, I know so little about football. Like, it's worse than what I know about baseball. But if that's where Team Taylor is, I guess that's where we are too. So go Chiefs.
Okay. Amy Wu Silverman, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. RBC Capital Markets. And the concept there, folks, is really, really important in that you can have a VIX of 16.09, but that's a summed index VIX.
Yep.
And it hides and masks the dispersion outside of a number of is Peloton a winner this morning? I don't even know.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Okay, sure. The big winners like Peloton and Merck and Bristol Myers.
Peloton's up 10% here today, pre-market.
Really?
How about that?
It's all because of you.
Sure.
Do you have 3 or 4 in your house?
We have 2.
You have 2.
We have the bike and the treadmill.
Which is used more?
The bike probably, but we also do like the hikes. You can do like personalized hikes.
Michael Barr's doing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's out in the woods in Pennsylvania.
Yes. So our household, we are power users.
Do one of the bears in the backyard, Michael Barr, do you really call them Peloton? Some of the names?
So I won't get, attacked. Yes. I just, Mr. Peloton Bear, that's it.
They move at that speed, don't they?
Yeah, they move.
I've got a green on the screen right now. NASDAQ a little bit red, the VIX 16.10. That was brilliant. Amy Wu Silverman, thank you so much. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. The Trump administration's offer to pay federal employees through September if they agree to leave by February has attracted over 40,000 signups, about 2% of the federal civilian workforce. Federal employee unions have urged members not to take the deal, questioning its legality, and the Office of Personnel Management has warned workers that their jobs may not be safe if they don't take the offer. This as protests intensify over Elon Musk and DOGE, that is forcing the buyouts and the shutdown of federal government agencies like USAID. Some Democratic members of Congress, like Representative Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, joined protesters pushing back against Musk's efforts.
I am so tired of these billionaire boys and their grubby little hands.
Criticism continues over President Trump's call to remove Palestinians from Gaza and have the U.S. take over and level it out. Palestinian officials and others say Trump's plan to remove the displaced survivors amounts to ethnic cleansing. Trump, in a Truth Social post, says the Gaza Strip will be turned over to the U.S. by Israel at the conclusion of fighting. Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
The people who call that home will not be able to live there while you have crews coming in and removing debris, while you have munitions being removed, etc. That's the offer that he's made.
Trump went on to say no soldiers by the U.S. would be needed. President Trump has signed an executive order banning trans women and girls from participating in female sports in federally funded schools. Trump declaring this order a victory for female athletes in the country.
We're putting every school receiving taxpayer dollars on notice that if you let men take over women's sports teams or invade your locker rooms, you will be investigated for violations of Title IX and risk your federal funding. There will be no federal funding.
Meanwhile, advocacy groups fear this move will only lead to more discrimination and harassment. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Thanks so much. Out on YouTube, it's a font of wisdom.
Is it?
You can get a Dos Equis at a Taco Bell cantina.
Really?
8th Avenue and 51st Street.
Of course.
Is a Taco Bell cantina.
I gotta look this up.
Like there's Taco Bell.
Yep.
Wait a minute.
And then there's Taco Bell Cantina.
All right. I didn't know
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Out on YouTube.
Sure. News you can use.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you can get a margarita, but you can get a Dos Equis.
Is it subject to a tariff, though?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. It's 8th Avenue and 51st, and, team lunch. Here we go.
Yep, there we go.
We say good morning to all of you. It's Thursday, claims today, jobs report tomorrow.
Yep, exactly.
Are we in a Super Bowl mood yet?
No, it's amazing. I kind of feel like that week in between that they take off kind of loses the momentum there.
It used to be quaint, and now it's in a rushed world.
We'll fire up over the weekend, but no.
Well, it used to be the other way around, and then you played the Super Bowl, and then you had the Pro Bowl, which meant that the people who were in the Super Bowl may have had a chance to play also
and when's
in the
Pro Bowl now? Do they still do it?
We've done it.
They did it, really?
Before
the Super Bowl?
Before
they
the
play
Super
flag
Bowl.
football, Rich says. Yeah.
Flag football?
Yeah, that's how you work.
Katie Greifeld was a champion at Haverford in flag football. They invented it. They did. We have to get Catherine in here to talk about college flag football. She's killer at it. And the market, here's what I'm looking at on the screen. I'm looking at the 10-year real yield coming in with a vengeance. Under 2%, 1.99% right now. 2.02. Paul, quickly, what do you see on the screen?
I mean, a little bit of green here. The Nasdaq's pulling back just a little bit, but yields on. I mean, the 10-year Treasury time, we're sitting there at 4.44%, up a couple of basis points here today.
Yeah.
But we've had yields pull back.
Coming up, Paul Sweeney on a 30-year mortgage. It's Bloomberg's surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by IBKR. Will the year-over-year change in U.S. PPI exceed 3% in February 2025? At IBKR Forecast Trader, the yes was recently at 39%. What's your take? Trade your prediction at ibkr.com/forecast. All right, we've got little movement in futures. This is following yesterday's gains on Wall Street. NASDAQ futures down about 0.1%, 28 points. Dow futures little change, up 22. S&P futures up about 4. We had the 2-year yield at 4.20%, up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.44%, and that's up 2 basis points. Want to go straight to earnings? We have a lot coming in. We talked about Peloton. Their shares up 13% right now. Cost cuts boosted profit more than expected, even as its revenue continues to shrink. And have you noticed more Hilton hotels? Well, you should have, because it added 171 properties to its global network. That helped fourth quarter earnings beat expectations. Its shares are little changed. But Ford, the second largest U.S. automaker, down more than 5%, warned of a profit may fall by $2 billion or more this year on lower priced vehicles and also pricey new model launches. And we'll stick with cars quickly. Nissan reportedly looking for a new partner. It's preparing to end negotiations to form a joint holding company with Honda. And sources are saying that new ally would ideally be U.S. based. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. There's any number of stories out there, including the wonderful legal team at Bloomberg. This from the Washington Post. This time, the anti-Trump resistance is in the courts, not in the streets. For both of you supporting the president and those upset at the president, Wendy Schiller with us now, professor at Brown University. The subtitle, Professor Schiller, is the president issues orders that some say disregard the law. A haphazard group of opponents is filing lawsuits. Where is the judiciary, Professor Schiller?
Well, good morning, Tom. Good morning, Paul and Lisa. The judiciary, we have to wait and see which judiciary. As we know, venue shopping, which is the term that describes people who are interested in getting a particular ruling from the federal courts, find a plaintiff in particular jurisdictions to match what the ruling is that they want. So the Ninth Circuit in California is thought to be somewhat liberal. The Fifth Circuit, that deals with Texas mostly, and Oklahoma and Louisiana, is thought to be quite conservative. So those are appeals court circuits. You start in the district courts and you really venue shop to see, can you get a judge? We had a ruling from a Rhode Island judge that will issue a ruling that at least will give an injunction or some time for you to mobilize other forces in the American political system.
So I got somebody in Bethesda listening to 99.1 FM. Good morning, Nathan Hager. His food court's better than ours.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know what that's about.
It's very good.
Wendy, that person in Bethesda now, looking at DOGE or, name the crisis. I guess they're going after the FAA tomorrow, whatever. Whatever the crisis is, how long do they wait for the judiciary, whether Texas or California, to show up?
Well, they've already showed up, right? I mean, there have already been injunctions against the birthright executive order, for example, most recently, the spending, the freeze on the money that was spent. There already are temporary injunctions, but they're temporary. They have to really go to court and get them more firm if they want to do any stalling or blocking. And so it's going to crawl through the courts. And the question is, does the Trump administration pay attention to the federal courts? Will they actually abide by federal rulings? In the past, we've had state governors that said no to the federal government. It's unusual to have the federal government, the executive branch, say no to the federal courts. That's coming. And I think that's something we haven't seen before. And the impact of all these orders, Tom, we just simply don't know. I mean, first of all, he issues orders, then he takes it back. Or he issues orders and then he qualifies. So in terms of the Trump administration, how much is real? Firing federal employees seems to be quite real. The impact that the average American will feel, that's going to take a while.
So, Wendy, the news flow, not surprisingly, continues to be pretty darn steady coming out of Washington, D.C. What's the feeling about this Gaza news over the past couple of days? Was it an off-the-cuff remark? Was it a serious policy initiative? What are you hearing from your sources?
I can only, as I always do, speculate, but it is so in keeping with Donald Trump. He sees a beautiful property. I mean, it's on the water. It's beautiful. The weather's great. He literally, I think, perceives this as a good deal for Palestinians, a good deal unless they're forcibly removed, obviously, which would not be a good deal. But he's saying nothing's ever stuck. And if you don't have economic livelihood, you can't survive. And that is true. So, not every single thing Donald Trump says is untrue. We don't have any right to take it over at all, buy or sell or displace anybody. But when you think about his mindset, it's totally in keeping with Donald Trump's mindset to solve the problem through a business deal.
Was this the way Andrew Jackson was?
Andrew Jackson didn't have nearly as many layers of government, despite Jefferson's effort to build a bureaucracy. And he was a general. I mean, you know this story. You know very well about Eisenhower, how frustrated he was as president of the United States because he had been, the leader of the European theater in World War II. He was a general, and he would say things and they wouldn't get done. Trump has a general's mentality in that sense, and he wants things done. That's why he's letting Musk run the way he is. But when you can't fly because that's not working, when your water is no longer clean because that's not working, then we have to see whether there's any public reaction.
So, Wendy, I guess one of the more nuts and bolts things coming out of Washington is they need to get a budget strategy going here. There's a lot of legislation that's kind of queued up over the next several months. Do we have any idea how this will play out? Is the Trump administration, do they have a game plan for some of this legislation and some of this budgetary issues?
This is a jockeying between the House and the Senate vis-a-vis Trump. The Senate promises reconciliation, which means that you don't get filibustered. That means you can guarantee that you will get a budget through and the tax cut bill through, just as Obama used it for the Affordable Care Act. You can promise that to Trump. So in the game of delivering, John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader Republican, can deliver, whereas Mike Johnson does not have the votes to deliver the same budget because the very far right fiscal hawks want deeper cuts that the Senate won't take. So Thune's saying, listen, side with us, put pressure on the House because our people won't take those cuts. And then you've got a government that'll shut down. Here's the thing to watch for. Democratic strategy may be to shut down the government. We're just throwing it out there, but I'm just saying if you're going to stop this juggernaut of firing
Right.
people and shutting things down, shut the government down.
So, Wendy, you're quaffing lunch at Tammany Hall Pub and Parlor in Providence. There's like 4 Republicans at Brown.
Yep.
That's where they go to lunch. Yep. So, Professor Schiller, you're with the Republicans, the conservatives at Tammany Hall Pub and Parlor. And they ask you, when is Mr. Musk shown the door? How do you frame that discussion, that dialogue right now about this absolutely original thing that is DOGE?
Again, the same mantra over and over again. When people who live in red-leaning states feel the impact severely from some of the lack of government oversight, the lack of government inspection. We've got a bird flu that seems to be persistent, that's affecting now Nevada. You need the federal government to come in and help. USDA, you need CDC, you need these entities. And when they aren't there and nobody is picking up the phone and you can't get help, sooner or later, you will turn on the federal government and turn on Donald Trump. And if that happens and his ratings go down, his poll numbers have already gone down a little bit since he was elected, then he'll look to Musk and he'll conveniently probably blame Elon Musk and show him the door.
Right.
But for a lot of people, that may take too long for them to sort of escape any kind of injury or harm. So we'll have to see. You can make the federal government more efficient. I think there's a reasonable argument to make, but the way that they're doing it may be too abrupt.
And what's your
And there are more than 4 Republicans at Brown. I will just tell you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go wild today. 10. Wendy, just on DOGE and Mr. Musk, we got 40,000 people. I guess they're showing the door in September. I don't know. What's your timeline on Elon Musk? Do you have in your head, like, this guy's got through the weekend? Does this guy got through March? Does this guy got to the next Tesla earnings? What's the Schiller timeline on Mr. Musk?
Well, just one simple thing. A lot of federal grants run on a January schedule and a July schedule. So now you're dealing with the people who did apply in January or were going to, and now you're thinking about July. And as that money freezes up, it's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. People are going to feel it all over the country, in their hospital systems in particular. So I think I'm looking at June or July in terms of impact. All these changes, what are the impact? And now you're going to have Robert F. Kennedy most likely getting through at HHS. That's another huge feeder of money from the federal government to individuals and institutions. When that money gets blocked, services may not be able to be provided, and then people are going to feel it. It's the same scenario as Newt Gingrich in 1995. He was really riding high January to July, and then things fell off the rails.
Huge insight. Yep. That's what we love having Professor Schiller on, taking it back to that huge moment for Congressman and Speaker Gingrich in 1994. And you get to the middle of 1995, and it's sort of Emily Latilla, like, never mind. Right. There's lots of never mind going on right now.
Yeah, we'll see. There's a lot of pronouncements. We'll see how they play out over the coming months.
Yeah, we're trying to keep track of it. Exactly. Major shout out to David Gura, Joe Matthew, Kaylee Lyons, Anne-Marie Horton, Laura Davison, all sorts of people in Washington working 24/7 on this. They have not had a day off.
No.
Well into middle of January.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, it's 24/7. Futures up 3, Dow futures up 17. The VIX stable, I'm going to call it 15.98. Paul's looking at higher yields, all in all. It's Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures pretty much treading water right now. This is after yesterday's gains. We'll start with NASDAQ futures. Little change, down 18 points. Dow futures up 40 points. S&P futures up about 5. We have the 2-year yield at 4.19%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.44%, and that's up 2 basis points. Commodities, we have COMEX gold, $2,890 an ounce. We go to Brent crude, $74 a barrel. WTI crude, $71 a barrel. The Bloomberg dollar spot index up about 0.3%. The British pound down 1% at 123.69 against the dollar after the BOE cut its interest rate a 0.25 point to 4.5%. Well, after disappointment from Chipotle, you remember that. Well, it turns out Yum Brands, their sales beat expectations thanks to growth at Taco Bell. Pizza Hut had a 1% decline. Its shares of Yum Brands up about 1%. Hershey, it gave a weaker than expected annual profit. That was due to surging cocoa prices we've been hearing about, but shares are up 3% this morning. And Philip Morris International up 7%, better than expected profit. Sales of its Zyn nicotine pouches actually rose more than 25% last year. And finally, the turnaround strategy at Under Armour. Well, it looks like it's working. It's raised an annual profit guidance. Shares are up 7%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate it. We're into the currency market now. Litmus paper of the system, and I noticed yields coming in. The 10-year real yield printing a 1.99 yesterday afternoon was extraordinary. Futures, little green on the screen. Earnings mix, Paul? Is that like the basic sum?
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah, earnings mix. Audrey Chow-Friedman joins us right now. Audrey, I got to go to is it Montpellier is how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Montpellier.
Down south. Because the way Americans look at this is there's Paris, and then there's where they had the Gene Hackman movies in Marseille a million years ago. Paris is 31% of France GDP. Is Paris that dominant in France?
Well, it is. It is absolutely, Tom. It's a strong growth driver for the French economy. Wow. But the cities in the south, Tom, are growing a lot, and Montpellier is certainly one of them.
They're growing, but do they want? This is critical, folks. Do they want a strong euro or a weak euro? I mean, China wants a weak yuan. We get that. Does Paris and does Montpellier and Marseille, do they desire a below parity euro?
Probably want a stable euro. You know, from a business perspective, business angle perspective, I think the way you look at these things is probably not the actual level, but it's stability. So a gradual decline in the currency, if inflation is under control, it's actually good news. But if it's erratic, highly volatile, it's not great from a business perspective.
Is Governor Bailey providing stability to the United Kingdom through his Bank of England rate cut?
I think he is. I think he's trying to address, the economic problems that the UK are facing. I mean, the cut in interest rate today is welcome. I think there will be more to come and more to follow. The question is how much more will we see in the course of the year? I'd be tempted to say that we'll see more than what's currently priced in the market. And that will probably be negative for sterling. And if I'm wrong, and if the Bank of England that's actually cut less than what I'm saying, so if we don't go to year-end rates at about 3.75 or 3.5 for the UK, but the UK economy is actually not performing well. There'll be some stickiness in the inflation context. The Bank of England can't really cut. That's also bad news for sterling, because then you have a stagflation narrative that's in place.
And Paul, DXY 109 to 107 has come halfway back to 108, certainly not breaking through to new dollar strength.
Audrey, is your business just kind of boring these days, because it's just about
watch yourself here? She won't come on.
I know, long dollar. I mean, is there any other call than trying to trade around the dollar strength?
Yes, actually, it's not boring at all. It's super exciting. It's super volatile. I think FX this year is going to be very entertaining. And actually, it will be very entertaining for all asset classes, because even if you trade equity, you need to have the view on FX right. And that's the most compelling one to have right. So I think in terms of, dollar upside for now, for as long as you believe that the tariff narrative drives the currency market, which I think for the time being it does, dollar upside or long dollar positioning will continue to be seen as the path of least resistance. However, Paul, there is one currency for which I'm starting to, kind of feel that time maybe on dollar yen as well. So the yen is the currency, I'm thinking about that. I'm quite positive about both cyclically, structurally, and that could even apply to dollar yen downside. And actually, the price action we've seen on dollar yen early in the week, when the dollar was rallying on the tariff headlines against everything on Monday, but dollar yen was very sticky. And since then, we've lost 3 big figures. And that's kind of telling me something. You want to have diversified portfolio. The dollar makes sense for the time being, but everyone is long the dollar. We know the narrative, and we're still relying on the US economy continuing to outperform. Don't forget, we are at a more advanced and a more mature stage in the US economic cycle. All it takes is any kind of softness in the US data, the market to start to wonder, how much more upside we see on the US economy. And then everybody will turn bearish on the dollar. And maybe if you want to be ahead of the curve and be a little bit brave, I suppose dollar yen downside may be the most interesting one to embrace at this point.
Audrey, I'm going to butcher this, but let's try it. Latil Setois, it's Montpellier, white wine, thyme, black olives, olive oil, squid, octopus, and tomato.
Oh boy.
Really, Audrey?
Yes, sounds like it's an interesting choice. But where did you see this one from?
This is the local dish of Montpellier. It says. I don't know.
Okay.
That's what it says. Okay, thank you, Audrey. Audrey Chell-Freeman.
Thank you.
With this in Southern French cuisine.
Yeah, there you go.
It's like Marseille. That's all we know.
Sure.
There's like a beach over to the right towards Italy.
I know.
And it's so much more than that. And she says it's expanding. It's a huge story for France right now as the South expands, even with some drier weather. Futures advance up 8. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Donald Trump reasserted his vision for a spectacular development in the Gaza Strip, led by the U.S. and without Palestinians, in a social media post early today. Trump wrote on his Truth Social platform that Israel would hand over control of Gaza to the U.S. at the conclusion of fighting, and that no U.S. soldiers would be needed to execute his plan. During the White House press briefing yesterday, spokesperson Caroline Leavitt said the president has been working on the idea for some time.
This is an out-of-the-box idea. That's who President Trump is. That's why the American people elected him. And his goal is lasting peace in the Middle East for all people in the region.
Leaders of neighboring countries like Jordan and Egypt, as well as Palestinians in Gaza, are pushing back on the idea, calling it a non-starter. The Trump administration's offer to pay federal employees through the end of September if they agree to leave by the end of February has attracted more than 40,000 signups. That's about 2% of the federal civilian workforce. Today is the last day for federal workers to decide if they want to quit their jobs. Democratic senators held the Senate floor overnight to oppose the nomination of Russell Vogt, President Trump's pick for director of the Office on Management and Budget. Vogt is one of the authors of Project 2025, a set of conservative policy proposals that includes an expansion of executive power. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar was among the senators speaking last night.
According to reports, he was a driving force behind the administration's decision to freeze federal funding. Stephen Miller even credited, someone very close to Donald Trump, even publicly credited Vogt with coming up with the idea. It was Vogt's plan that led the administration to take an action that hurt millions of Americans.
Vogt's confirmation vote is scheduled to be held this evening. Snow and ice for more than 100 million Americans as a storm moving from the plains into the Northeast. The widespread storm system affects at least 16 states under snow and ice alert. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. The president at not one but two national prayer breakfasts the first Thursday of February, going back to Eisenhower, back to 1953, with a congressional tilt to it. And we'll have to see. We're gonna monitor it very carefully. And you have to see, I mean, how can he not do a national prayer breakfast and not address Gaza? I don't understand this morning how you get through that. You know, we'll have to see this. Say, the least. This afternoon, Saleha Mohsen, in a conversation with the Secretary of Treasury, an exceptionally timely interview, Mr. Bessent, in conversation this afternoon. This is Bloomberg's Surveillance.
Now a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines on Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, and Lisa Mateo.
We lift right on cue. Futures flat now. Futures up 10. Gives a better tape to say. The Lisa Daily look at the front pages. Lisa Mateo reports she's far beyond driven. Brought to you by IBKR. Will the U.S. CPI exceed 2.4%? In March, in 1 month? Trade your prediction with IBKR Forecast Trader. The yes was recently at 60%, 60%. That for the March 2025s. Buy yes or no and earn $1. If you're right, go to ibkr.com/forecast. Lisa, what do you have?
Okay, countdown to the Super Bowl, right? So the Wall Street Journal has us look into the new trends that you're going to see during the commercials, because the commercials, a big draw for the Super Bowl, right? So one burger chain is bringing back an old marketing strategy. Listen to this.
And I've got just what you need to cure that post-party bug. The Carl's Jr. Hangover Burger.
Carl's Jr. bringing the sexy advertising back, bikinis and burgers. You remember Paris Hilton, right? Kim Kardashian, they started this whole commercial trend. Now it's influencer Alex Earl, okay? Who? For those of you who are watching YouTube, you can see the commercial right now. Okay. There you go. But the experts are saying that it shows the shift. Yes, there it is. See, remember Paris Hilton? Oh my! See, no one's paying attention to Lisa.
Am I the only one on the planet that doesn't know Carl? Is The Rock in a commercial? That's all I want to know.
No. But what they're saying is that they're saying that it's kind of the country feeling, the new feeling under the new administration. Nice. That's what they're saying. So the new administration is saying going back to old ways, and this Carl's Jr. going back to old ways they used to do commercials.
Can I just suggest maybe it will be a pleasant relief for all from what everybody's going through on a day-to-day basis. Like you get to Sunday and it's actually like football.
Yeah, be a good football game. We'll have some fun.
Oh, there you go. You know who else is doing it? OpenAI is actually debuting a commercial at the Super Bowl. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. So stay tuned for that. Sports books. Okay, so they want to cash in on the Taylor Swift fever at the Super Bowl, but it's not that easy. So novelty prop bets, you know what I'm talking about, right? Super Bowl centering on Taylor Swift, like will Travis Kelce propose to Taylor Swift on the field? Like those kind of bets, okay? But they're on unregulated sites, so the real guys can't get to it, but they're doing something different. So DraftKings is coming up with a quick way. They're called Swiftie Specials. Nice. So these kind of bets. So prop bets that are named after Swift songs. So for example, you have the Shake It Off bet, right? Okay, which has the Philadelphia Eagles scoring first and the Chiefs to win. And then you have the Mine bets, which is Swift's boyfriend Kelce getting 87 or more receiving yards and scoring one or more touchdowns. You see, so they're kind of using it that way in order to get it to be allowed on their sites.
On this stuff, I
so
guess.
The answer is if the Eagles win, it's a Champagne Problems bet.
Right.
That's one of her songs.
Champagne Problems.
You didn't think I knew that, did you? Next.
Okay, moms and dads, I'm having trouble keeping up with the lingo that the kids are coming up with. It's fast and furious. The Journal's saying it's because of social media. So, for example, remember Riz? That was like the hot word. It's old. It's old already.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, so you have to get to the new words like Betamaxing, Gyat, GigaChad, Batty. Have you heard any of these?
Nope.
Sigma. Okay.
Nope.
So Tom, if your daughter calls you Omega, like you're so Omega, that's a bad thing.
That's a bad thing?
Just letting you know. Okay. So if it comes up at the dinner table,
She said
you're
that
prepared.
last night. I said, no, go Tridel. Don't go Chi Omega. Right. Go Tridel. And it didn't work.
Omega is like the lowest rate you
The
can get.
lowest rating
Omega?
you can
I'll
get.
use that today.
Yes.
Yes.
Get one more in here. Squeeze one more in here.
And that's also AM radio could get a second wind.
Yes.
We're very excited about this,
1130.
okay? Objections from EV manufacturers, you remember that, right? But bipartisan legislation advancing again in the Senate, so it could come back and get a second wind again.
The newspapers, Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. What's so important here is to understand that there's usually one moment in every show where at 3 p.m. I'm getting emails.
Mm-hmm.
Our global technical director, Metalhead Ken, said, you gotta do Pantera for Lisa. Pantera, they launched #1 here. I'm broken. Oh, wonderful. Nice, Lisa. There's 18 more seconds of this.
Speed metal.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
It's not really a Mag 7. It's an Elon 7.
How long can bull markets last? Give us a sense of where we are.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
President Trump's tariffs really rock global markets.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr. This morning, Bloomberg Surveillance. We're brought to you across the nation, your commute. On YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts, and we thank Interactive Brokers. We're brought to you by IBKR. Will the percentage of U.S. experiencing drought conditions exceed 18% on February 18th, just in a number of days, 2025? At IBKR Forecast Trader, the yes was recently at a large 35%. What's your take? Trade your prediction on drought conditions in America. Do that at ibkr.com/forecast. That's a whole new thing, Paul. Commodity trading. I got a lecture on this. I think Lionel Laurent in Europe once.
Okay.
It's all the rage over
It
there.
is. You can do it.
Interactive Brokers. Bringing it here. The rage this afternoon is Amazon. We got claims here in this hour.
We do.
And then we go to Amazon earnings.
Yeah, we go to Amazon after the close, Tom, and it's going to be about the cloud. We saw some slower cloud growth from Google and Microsoft, so that'll be the focus, I think, a little bit here for our friends at Amazon.
AWS is what we
that's
call
what
it.
they do.
I don't really. And Anurag's going to be up.
Well, he's our expert.
We need to talk to Anurag about this. I got a lift in the market. We started out flat with a little bit of red on the screen, and there's a fractional lift here going on. I don't want to overplay it, but we need to look to Washington. We have not one but two prayer breakfasts.
Okay.
I believe one at the Hilton, where we have the White House Correspondents' Dinner. 3,000
Nice.
people packed in them. This goes back to Dwight David Eisenhower.
Okay, very good.
Back to
And
the
president will be
50s,
there?
and
Sure.
President will be there, I'm sure, to make, I assume, to make comments as well. The Secretary of the I'll get 3, 2, 1. I'm still broken from Pantera in the last block. The Secretary of the Treasury, Mr. Bessent.
Yes.
In an important conversation this afternoon with Saleha Mohsen.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got to figure out where they want to go with some of their policy, Tom, on the financial side.
And, more than timely, I would say as well. Coming up, we're going to speak to the gentleman with leadership at the Los Angeles Port, Gene Sirota.
This is big.
Really timely here with all the tariff discussion going on. From the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Yeah, we are in the busiest day of earnings season today. The EVTS function in the terminal giving me agita right now. It goes on and on. But let's get right to futures first. So NASDAQ futures, little change, up about 9. Dow futures up 77. 7 points. S&P futures up 14. We have the 2-year yield, 4.21%, up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.45%, and that's up 3 basis points. We have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.3%. I want to point out the British pound down 1% at 123.72 against the dollar after the BOE cut its interest rate a quarter point. And with the earnings craze, forgot to mention initial jobless claims about a half hour from now. Some more eco data out today. Now we go to earnings with Honeywell reporting adjusted earnings per share beat estimates, but its forecast for 2025 profit, well, that fell short, so its shares are down 3%. Also announced it's splitting into 3 independent companies. We have Ford down 5%. It warned that profit could fall by $2 billion or more this year. Then we go to Tapestry. Their shares up 15%. It raised its guidance again for the year. Stronger than expected sales at Coach. That's the reason why. And since we're talking luxury, Gucci parting ways with the creative director after only 2 years at Kering.
I didn't
struggling
know that.
to pull out a slump.
Deal.
Kering down 0.5% in Paris. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
I don't have that news in front of me. That's a big deal. Boy, wow.
Well, Tom, I know you're
really troubled.
I know you're a big gamer here. Roblox sinks 30% after fourth quarter daily active users missed estimates. I guess people aren't just gaming as much as they used to.
Yeah, that's a theme. That's not something we do, but we're referencing Brian Egger on the gambling, but the gaming is really off the mark, I think.
Wow.
Let's do this. We're going to do a really important conversation on Los Angeles and tariffs, but we've got to get in some Fed discussion. In Jobs Day discussion with claims in this hour, Veronica Clark with us right now, well-timed with Citigroup as well. Veronica, one Fed question. I think all the other nations like England are cutting interest rates. Does that make our Fed ever more restrictive if everybody else is cutting interest rates?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense it does. You know, if that does mean a stronger dollar, that's a tightening of financial conditions. Of course, I think the Fed is going to be most focused on domestic inflation and employment data, of course. And I do think they will be cutting rates again, of course, at some point this year.
Hey, Veronica, tomorrow, of course, we're going to get the non-farm payrolls at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Consensus is 170,000. The whispers a little bit higher than that. What's your view of this U.S. labor market right here?
Yeah, our fundamental view of the labor market really hasn't changed too substantially. This looks like a very low churn labor market to us. You know, hiring is very low, layoffs are very low, quits are very low. So people are not moving around, which doesn't necessarily look like a healthy labor market to me, especially that low hiring and low quit rate. It doesn't seem like people feel good about job prospects and businesses are not hiring. But there are technical issues, I think, and I do actually think tomorrow's number will be a bit stronger. We're expecting 195,000.
So with an unemployment rate, I guess the consensus is for 4.1%. How does the Fed look at that unemployment rate? I guess they got to feel like we're pretty close to, if not at full employment.
Yeah, that's a very healthy level for the unemployment rate. You know, we did have this move higher last spring and summer where it was starting to look a bit concerning, but we've had about 6 months now where the unemployment rate's moved sideways a bit above 4%, you know, higher than the lows we had in 2023, but that level is still okay. I would still be worried that not necessarily tomorrow, but as we're getting into the spring and summer, we do still see that unemployment rate ticking higher. It is just this consequence of very low hiring dynamics, and you could get that unemployment rate moving higher as you get, you know, new students entering the labor force. You know, if you do happen to lose your job, you're not finding work. So I would think there is upward bias still.
Veronica, I look at the jobs report. Just want to find a question here. We've got to go to the massive Pacific breaking news on tariffs. But Veronica Clark, as I look at the jobs report, color the not one, the two, but the sets of revisions we need to fold into our analysis.
Yeah, there are going to be a lot of revisions. We're actually going to get a lot tomorrow. We obviously every month get some revisions to the prior couple months, but tomorrow we get the benchmarking revisions, which we got the preliminary estimate of these back in August, and it showed pretty substantial downward revisions to payroll job growth. Those will get finalized tomorrow. I think it's just telling us that, you know, there are a lot of weird elements of this data post-pandemic, and you have to take your labor market signals, you know, across many different months and many different data sets. And to us, that looks like a labor market that is still weakening from restrictive rates.
Okay, Veronica, thank you so much. Too short a visit. We got to go on the tariff news as well. We're monitoring in Washington the National Pair Breakfast. There are 2 of them today, and we'll see. We're going to monitor that carefully, and if the president speaks of policy, we will go to this. somewhere in the vicinity of all this political maelstrom we're in, 4 or 5 days ago, I said, is Gene Soroka's probably planning Dodgers spring training?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, they're winners. And you figure Gene Soroka of the Port of Los Angeles, they'd be out there. And, of course, the horrific fires have been a huge distraction north of his abode. But we are thrilled to have him in studio today from Los Angeles. A container from Shanghai takes 27 to 36 days. Really? It's a 40-foot container, and it's running on this number here, $4,800 to $7,300 fee. How has that container changed with the advent of the Trump second administration?
Tom, good morning. I think what we've seen thus far is even going back to the campaign trail in the summertime, a lot of retailers and importers that I speak with directly said, let's start bringing in, averaging down the cost just in the event that we see a tariff implementation date. Sure enough, the day came. What we got to look at now is the small to medium-sized importer that maybe did not have the ability to do that. What impact is it going to have on their cost structure and prices for sale?
So, I mean, it's not the Panama Canal, but paint the picture outside your ports, plural. Is it like boats lined up and they're on the radio, get us in, where's the damn tugboat? I mean, do you use tugboats?
Yes, we do.
Sure. Okay, see, I'm learning every day. But what's the emotion, the mood a mile offshore right now? Is it like Singapore where they're all stacked up?
No, it's not. And the feeling is good because our dock workers have a lot of work on those docks, moving this cargo through all 435 congressional districts. Tom, I'll give you this example. From July to October, our peak season, we moved more cargo than we did back in 21 during the height of COVID. Not one ship was backed up. Fourth quarter, our best on record in 117 years. January ahead of Lunar New Year holiday will also be the best ever.
Tom, you look at math.
He's like a PR machine for Los Angeles. He's not on speaking terms with 6 unions, but other than that, it's great.
During the pandemic, Gene absolutely educated us all about all this supply chain stuff, and we really appreciate that.
Seriously.
I go to MapGo on the Bloomberg terminal and I look at the vessels, and they got all the vessels around the Los Angeles, Long Beach port. Seems like stuff's coming in, coming out pretty well. How is the backup? How are you guys dealing with the flow here these days?
Yeah, the flow's good. 2/3 of the cargo, Paul, moves in and out of our port by truck. The wait times are better than when they were before COVID. So I like it. But every day there's something, whether it's discussion about policy, shifting headwinds on trade, sourcing that may look different. How are we going to come out of Lunar New Year is also going to be a question. Spring fashion, et cetera.
Back up. We got a quarter moon right now, and I saw Castor and Pollux on the horizon last night. They were gorgeous. The planets are lined up. Why is the Port of Los Angeles worried about Lunar New Year?
Well, that's the traditional holiday for most of the folks that work in factories and on the docks in Asia that we trade with. So they'll take a break, go back to their hometowns, visit with family and friends. Just last night is when the office folks came back. So I was talking to a few of my friends. I worked in China for 4 years. What's the mood like? And it's the purchase orders are up. We got to get back to business, and we got to start pumping out these containers.
What's the number one myth, fiction that Americans like me think about China's docks, China's export business? You worked there for 4 years. What's a single idea you want to convey that we don't know?
I would say that it's this tug and pull with America around economic dominance. These are the two biggest economies in the world. 90% of trade moves on water. Their exports are a big part of the GDP. So there's something here. Let's negotiate. Rules-based trade has always been a hallmark of the American landscape. Let's keep it going in that direction.
So, Gene, you guys had your labor issues a year or two ago, I guess. Where are we on the East Coast? Because I know that was a little bit of a concern. Where are we on the labor situations on the East Coast? I'm sure here you're in New York today. You're probably meeting with some of your counterparts here.
The East Coast is New Jersey.
Yes, New Jersey. I'm at the port of Jersey. What are you seeing here on the East Coast?
Yeah, the East Coast and Gulf Coast dock workers, along with their employers association, the U.S. Maritime Alliance, reached a tentative agreement on their next contract back on January 8th.
Okay.
Ratification has to take place on both sides with the companies and the rank and file dock workers, but I think we're in a good position. And as I've said to you guys before, This American economy continues to run at high levels when all of our ports are operating at top speed.
What's your number one constraint? Is it the trucks? Is it trains? Is it union types that don't want technology? What's the constraint to our excellence in Los Angeles and ports?
I think the number one constraint is what we're addressing every day, and that's efficiency. This port is developed to be a transit facility, not a warehouse. And if we keep people moving in that direction, you talk about front loading of cargo. Is that cargo just going to sit? So far, no. We've seen it move out into the American economy, the distribution network. That's what we look at every single day. I get a report, 0600. In about a minute, I can tell the vital statistics of the port just by that velocity,
That's
Tom.
6 a.m. in military.
Normal speak. Gene, I mean, nobody has a better view of Asia trade with the U.S. than you do at the Port of Los Angeles. How do you think about the next year or two in a Trump administration? Do you expect any material increases, decreases, stay the same? How do you think about that?
Well, I think the negotiations are going to be front and center. And if tariffs, as the administration says, are the precursor to those negotiations, we'll see more of it. I see a real opportunity for American exporters, from our agriculture community to heavy machinery and cultural exchange, being at the forefront of what more we can do to export American goods, which will help better put in place balances of trade, maybe not one for one in the container business, but that helps GDP growth.
And the microeconomics of this is really complex, but as a general statement, with all your experience, are the tariffs eaten by Americans and consumers, or are the tariffs eaten by the businesses because they still want to move units? Are they going to take some of that forced price increase and take it out of their profit?
It depends on the company, and that's what we're looking at right now, Tom.
Give us an example.
Company imports, new 10% levy on tariffs. They got to pay that soon as that container hits the shores based on their trade agreement with the manufacturer. Whether they pass that on to the consumer or their next buyer remains to be seen. But sure enough, that's happening.
You got experience at this. What happens?
Yeah. It gets passed on to the consumer, and the wholesale price index goes up. That moves on to the retailer.
How much of the Port of Los Angeles, the Port of Long Beach, how much is import versus export of your traffic?
Right now, we're averaging about 4 to 1. 4 imports for every 1 export container. The balance 3 containers go back empty, which is the big push.
Back empty.
Empty. So that's the big push. Can we better utilize these containers with exports? Again, across the major categories. And we're doing that, but still a long way from trying to balance this.
Is it like the old days? I'm thinking Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, where somebody can book a cabin on a freighter going back to China instead of flying, go to your port and get on a freighter and be in the cabin going back. That romance of the 1950s, is it gone?
It's a little bit different now. It really is. And even when I worked for American President, when I worked for American President Lines, the President Wilson was huge in doing that cruise business, and it continued to evolve as we stepped into the container business in the late 50s.
Do you remember the Constitution and the Independence? Cary Grant signed his movie deals only if he could go across the Atlantic on the Constitution or the Independence, because he wanted to be on those old ship. That was a passenger ship, but it was a lot like American President, wasn't it?
Iconic Hollywood stories.
Is it gone?
It's a lot different today. That's right.
I got 30 seconds. You to the north on this horrific fire.
Yeah. What we're looking at now is a great federal response. State of California behind Governor Gavin Newsom, Mayor Bass in Los Angeles, county supervisors, all pulling in the same direction. Now it's about a rebuild. 14,000 homes were destroyed in Altadena and Pacific Palisades.
Right.
This is a unified approach to do whatever we can to rebuild these great communities.
Sparta just emails in, ask Gene Soroka if he can get me on a freighter to Shanghai. Gene Soroka, go away. Gene Soroka, Executive Director, Port of Los Angeles, out on YouTube. Thank you so much for your comments. You love having Gene on, and we do too. With an update there, the actual reality of it's in a container and it's coming over. There's a physicality to this that's lost in shows like Bloomberg Surveillance. We have a better shape right now. Futures up 12. They advance the VIX 15.83. I got my eyes on the 10-year real yield, 2.02%. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Trump is doubling down on the Gaza takeover idea he proposed at a White House news conference this week. In a Truth Social post this morning, the president said Israel would hand over control of the enclave at the conclusion of fighting, and no U.S. soldiers would need to be involved. He says the nearly 2 million Palestinians that live in Gaza would be resettled in the region. Bloomberg's Laura Davison has the latest from Washington.
What he suggested in a social media post is that at the conclusion of fighting, the Gaza Strip would be turned over by Israel to the U.S., when then the U.S. would be responsible for developing some sort of hotel resort projects. He says that the Palestinians would be moved to other countries where they would live in new modern homes. He did not specify who would be in charge of making sure that housing is available, but he's continuing to really double down on this idea that he floated at the press conference with Netanyahu earlier this week.
Bloomberg's Laura Davison reports White House aides tried to downplay the idea yesterday as out-of-the-box thinking. They said Trump is not committing U.S. troops or money to Gaza's reconstruction. President Trump has signed an executive order banning trans women and girls from participating in female sports in federally funded schools. Trump declaring this order a victory for female athletes in the country.
With this executive order, the war on women's sports is over.
The Trump administration's offer to pay federal employees through September if they agree to leave by February has attracted over 40,000 sign-ups, about 2% of the federal civilian workforce. Driving is a mess this morning in New York City and the tri-state area. Snow and ice hit the rush hour. Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn has the latest.
Snow will change to rain before ending this afternoon. An inch or two may fall in the city. It looks like we'll see a little bit more than that in some of the suburbs. We're near 40. Winter weather advisory in effect until 11.
More with Rob in a few moments. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thank you. There are two prayer breakfasts today, this morning. This first breakfast we see at Capitol Hill, the National Prayer Breakfast. It is bipartisan. In the last 15 minutes, Senator Thune and Senator Klobuchar with 1 Corinthians 13 and Psalm 23 by Senator Klobuchar. And now, just stepping to the podium, the President of the United States.
Jeffries, thank you. And many other very distinguished leaders in the room. It's great group of people. If we could ever come together, it would be unbelievable. It may not happen, but it should, and maybe it will. From the earliest days of our republic, faith in God has always been the ultimate source of the strength that beats in the hearts of our nation. We have to bring religion back. We have to bring it back much stronger. It's one of the biggest problems that we've had over the last fairly long period of time. We have to bring it back. Thomas Jefferson himself once attended Sunday services held in the old House chamber on the very ground where I stand today. So there could be nothing more beautiful than for us to gather in this majestic place. It is majestic, and reaffirm that America is and will always be one nation under God. At every stage of the American story, our country has drawn hope and courage and inspiration from our trust in the Almighty. Deep in the soul of every patriot is the knowledge that God has a special plan and a glorious mission for America. And that plan is going to happen. It's going to happen. I hope it happens sooner rather than later. It's going to happen. And it's His hand that guides us every single step of the way. And all of you and the things we have to do is to see the defining role that faith and prayer have played in the life of our nation. And you just have to look at this building, and you can look at each other. You can really look at each other. It's defined almost everyone in this room. I think faith has been very strong with the people in this room. Just steps away from here in the Hall of Columns is the statue of John Winthrop, who famously proclaimed that America would stand as a city upon a hill, a light to all nations, with the eyes of all people upon us. Today, almost 400 years after that famous sermon, we see that with the Lord's help, the city stands taller and shines brighter than ever before, or at least it soon will. In that same hall, we also find the statue of the great Roger Williams, who founded the state of Rhode Island, named its capital city Providence, and built the first Baptist
The President of the
Church.
United States at the first of two prayer breakfasts. This is a ceremony that goes back to the West Coast of the 1930s, and then in 1953 in Washington with Ike and every president in attendance since. There are two prayer breakfasts this morning. We'll continue to monitor President Trump's comments, and if he speaks of the politics of the moment, domestic and foreign, we'll try to jump in and listen to the President of the United States. Right now we're listening 6 minutes away from claims as we begin to look at, after ADP, look at claims, and then heavily revisions tomorrow to the jobs report. We need an update with an advancing market, futures up 13, from the Interactive Broker Studios. Our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Yeah, and those claims comes right ahead of Jobs Day tomorrow. So we'll get to NASDAQ futures right now. They're a little changed up about 8 points. Dow futures up 39 points. S&P futures up 13. We'll go to the two-year yield, 4.21%, up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.44%, and that's up 2 basis points. We go to the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, up about 0.3%. To earnings we go, and there's a lot to get to. Roblox shares really getting beat up this morning, down 21%. Fourth quarter daily users missed estimates. Then you have Ford down 5%, warned that profit could fall by $2 billion or more this year. Bristol Myers shares down 5%. Sales and profit forecast for 2025 below estimates. And finally, Eli Lilly up 1%. Full year earnings forecast came in line with estimates. It's actually working to fix those inventory problems with its new obesity and diabetes drugs. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Lisa, thanks so much. Daryl Cronk is such a grizzled pro. He understands when there's 3 breaking news stories going at once. He and I are in third place here at a moment's notice. We may go back to the president. We're monitoring this at the Capitol Hill prayer breakfast right now. Mr. Cronk, thank you so much for joining us. And I guess I've got to get to the jobs report. Essentially, are we waiting for the American labor economy to break? And it just hasn't broken.
Yeah, it really hasn't broken, and I'm not sure I'd expect it to break in the very near term. I mean, obviously with the seasonal adjustments tomorrow, I think there's risk to the upside that the headline number runs hot tomorrow, above the 170 consensus. The reality is this: when you think about the rest of this year, you need 2 5s, right? You need the 10-year Treasury to stay below 5%, and most importantly on the labor market, you need the unemployment rate to stay below 5%.
All right, now I get it. Okay.
And we've got some decent margin on both with a 4.1% unemployment. Companies just don't seem to be laying off workers at this point. They're not robustly hiring, but they're just not, moving them to the exits on the fear that they may need them again, they won't be able to find the skilled labor, or they'll have to come back at higher prices when they do need to rehire them.
So given that backdrop, it feels like 2025 is a year where the Fed's not going to give us a whole lot here. It's got to be earnings driven, a lot of folks are suggesting. How do you think about earnings and the earnings as a driver for this market in 2025?
I think it's exactly right, Paul. It's all about the earnings, right? So spin backwards to go forwards, right? In 2023, we got I'm going to use the S&P as the barometer. We got, call it 25%, 26% out of the S&P. It was almost all multiple expansion, just anemic earnings growth. 24, we're about ready to put the fourth quarter in the books, right? We're over halfway through. We're running at, call it 10% earnings growth, right? But that pales in comparison to the 25% appreciation we got in 24, right? Now in 25, we think earnings can grow lower double digits, call it 11, 12, 13%. And maybe the most important element isn't even the bottom line earnings number, it's the top line revenue, and which is growing this quarter at 5%.
Oh, this is the Wells Fargo history. This goes back to Jay Bryson and John Sylvia years ago. You guys have always had a reverence for nominal GDP. And to me, the great miscall of the last 18 months is a nominal statistic nobody expected.
That's
Can
right.
you model above 4.8% nominal GDP forward? I don't care how it's made up, but that's what we got.
I think that's right, Tom, and I would take it even higher than that. Like we walked into this year thinking the economy is going to run hot, both on growth and inflation. So if I take 2.5% growth, and our number for CPI at year-end 2025 is 3.3%. So 2.5 and 3.3, I'm 5.5% nominal, right? That's a great environment for earnings and for revenue growth.
Can we get a 7,000 SPX quote out of Daryl Cronk this morning? Paul Sweeney needs to make some moves.
We're a little short of that. I think we'd have to get north of 15% earnings growth because we shouldn't get multiple expansion this year, right? We've got all the multiple expansion in 23, 24. Okay. Prices can go up in relation to what earnings can drive.
I'm sure, Darryl, your Wells Fargo clients are saying, boy, I can get some really nice returns in the fixed income market these days after years and years and years of having almost 0% interest rates. How do you tell them to play that side of the business?
So just like being higher on GDP and higher on inflation, we're also naturally higher on rates. We think the 10-year Treasury ends this year at 4.75.
Okay.
So think about the long side of the curve, right? It's a term premium, it's an inflation premium, it's a growth premium. When the Fed started lowering interest rates September 18th, the 10-year was at 3.70. Mm-hmm. Today it's at 4.44, right? So it's materially higher. Where's that coming from? It's all term premium, right? It's not inflation premium. It's not growth premium at this point.
Daryl Cronk with us, with Wells Fargo. We're thrilled he's with us. We're going to try to do the economic data here and go back to Mr. Cronk. We're monitoring the president's comments at Capitol Hill with Senator Thune and Senator Klobuchar and other worthies, the National Prayer Breakfast. I believe he'll then migrate to the Hilton Hotel with some 3,000 people. That's where they have the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And they'll be at the Hilton Hotel to have a second prayer breakfast, I believe, with a more partisan tinge to it. We'll have to see how that plays out. We are monitoring the president's comments here with all we've seen. A real privilege to go to Ethan Bronner in Tel Aviv here after Mr. Cronk. We'll do that in a moment. And the economic data this morning, I mean, Paul, it comes out. Unit labor costs are down a little bit on that slow, long productivity number. That's constructive for some form of disinflationary trend. Claims, I don't know, 219,000.
The consensus was 213,000.
Futures lift.
Yeah, exactly. We came in at 219,000, kind of in line with expectations. The revisions last month, Tom, were pretty much right in line. So again, I would characterize 219,000 initial jobless claims as kind of more or less in line with what we've seen over the last couple of years.
I look at the 4-week moving average. Moving average here on that. We haven't moved yet. What we just proved is Lisa Mateo does the economic indicators better than we do. That's what we just proved with great certitude. Those economic indicators always brought to you by IBKR with a year-over-year change in the U.S. PPI exceed 3% in February of this year. Now, at IBKR Forecast Trader, the yes was recently at 39% for February 25, above 3%, 39%. What's your take? Trade your prediction, your future at ibkr.com/forecast. Love and read. That's fun to read. I mean, it's a bet here on what's going on with all that's going on. Daryl Cronk with us here. Let's get some, Paul, jump in with Daryl here to get some observation here.
Daryl, one of the big issues here is kind of what's going to lead this market higher. We've been so wedded to the Mag 7. Do we still play that game? Do we try to look for some other areas to kind of drive this market? Where do we go?
I think you got to broaden the exposure out. Look at tech year to date is dragging by almost 600 basis points. Right? When's the last time you've seen tech, trail and be one of the few negative GIC sectors in the year? You've got value outperforming growth year to date by a couple hundred basis points, right? Some of those dynamics are changing. We think basically the narrative you want to be is cyclicals and anything but defensives. Here, right? So that means financials, that means industrials, that means fade staples, fade utilities. And even though healthcare is showing a little signs of life, I'd still fade healthcare.
You guys have nailed the U.S. call. Do you stay with that? I mean, I got dollar resilience. I don't have international happening, do I, Daryl?
No. It is U.S. and a full U.S. story. It's very difficult to find any place around the globe that you can pound the table and say is attractive. The point, though, is if you use DXY, right, above 110 on the DXY, it starts to become painful, right? So you can have dollar strength. You don't have to have dollar weakness. You just don't need dollar parabolic. Like
dollar resilience is different than dollar strength.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Daryl, thank you so much in your sport to play with us this morning, given the news flow. We continue to monitor President Trump's comments here. This is an important conversation, and we're going to take advantage of all of Ethan Bronner's decades of skill of looking at the Levant from Turkey. I don't want to talk about Turkey this morning, but maybe he'll bring it. I look, Ethan, at the Jerusalem Post, okay, an iconic newspaper in Israel, and just one headline: Trump considers Morocco, Puntland, I don't even know what that is, or Somaliland for relocated Gazans. What is the domestic Israeli reaction and politics to what President Trump has advocated?
Tom, I would say about 2/3 to 3/4 of Israelis are thrilled at what President Trump has suggested. It's only the left, and it is relatively non-existent. It's sort of the newspaper of Haaretz, its writers and its readers. Everybody else thinks nothing more wonderful could happen than for the United States to take over Gaza and protect Israel from another Hamas stand as they see it. So that's the answer.
Another headline from a couple days ago, IDF. We had a guest on the other day who is a family in the IDF. The Army announces fallen soldiers in the Gaza Strip. Ethan, is the Gaza Strip safe right now?
Relatively. I mean, look, it's a weird moment. It's 2+ weeks of the ceasefire. Israeli soldiers have pulled back to the periphery, to this 700-meter periphery zone that they've created. I'm not there, and it's difficult to really say. It's a construction zone, as the president has said. It's a pretty barren and difficult place, but I don't think it is a deeply dangerous place right this second.
Ethan, do the general public in Israel, do they believe that President Trump's plan to potentially, for lack of a better word, take over Gaza, take ownership of Gaza, do they believe that is a realistic possibility?
I think that everybody here, like everybody everywhere, is raising the question of how realistic and how serious this is. But I think that from an Israeli perspective, it is great that it opens the conversation beyond the binary of, is it either going to be run by Hamas or Palestinians, or we're going to have to occupy it. Okay. The idea is that that Gaza has been a source of enormous difficulty for Israel, and the notion that a friend would come and take it over, a powerful friend, and also threatening it to do so now, will perhaps drive Hamas to negotiate in a slightly different mindset than it's doing now. I don't know whether that's true, but that's how it's being viewed, as a kind of opening bid and as a notion that, well, maybe something else is possible, and our greatest ally is on our side in a way that we could never have imagined before. So people are pretty excited, except for those, as I say, who deeply embrace a two-state solution, and they are not a majority of this country.
Ethan Bronner, please stay with us. We'll continue with Mr. Bronner in Tel Aviv. We welcome all of you commercial-free. Bloomberg surveillance in this hour. We're monitoring the president's comments in Washington. He is speaking of religion and society away from the issues of the moment. So we'll talk to Ethan Bronner here. Anurag Rana is scheduled to join us here, of course, on this day of Amazon. Futures, not advanced, but futures have a bid. Futures up 13. Paul?
Ethan, what's the reaction from some of the other significant players in your region of the world as it relates to President Trump's comments on Gaza? What have we heard from Iran? What have we heard from some of the other players?
Specific, which is an opposition to this to this country and to the United States and so on. So obviously they think it's horrible. But more significantly is that every ally of the United States in the region outside of Israel has utterly rejected this as a sort of cleaned up version of ethnic cleansing, of a kind of Nakba, what happened to the Palestinians in 1948, again now. It has been completely and totally rejected by everybody.
Ethan, at 9/11, all of us in shock. I sat down and read the classic Albert Hourani a history of the Arab peoples. And it is
That's
just
an interesting day to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a month, and it was a quarter to get through 1,000 pages, and I'm still to this day carried by Egypt. The president has to talk to Sisi of Egypt. I've interviewed him, to some note, but how is Sisi or Jordan, how is Egypt or Jordan going to speak to the president of the United States after the events of the last couple days?
I think that's a great question, and both are due in the White House in coming weeks. At least the invitations have gone out, and I believe have been accepted. Look, I assume they're going to say what we're saying now, which is that the history of the Palestinians, the history of the region, is such that it is simply unacceptable and unimaginable that hundreds of thousands of Gazans are going to be moved into our countries. This makes no sense, Mr. President. We are all as eager as you are. We are happy to help lead the reconstruction. The Palestinians who are there need to stay there. They can be moved around inside, but we cannot accept them into our country. That violates the whole notion of Palestinian national movement, and it threatens our stability. And that's not nothing for you. We are already unpopular because we're holding on to peace with Israel. Don't make it worse for us, please, sir.
Ethan, aside from, I guess, the last 48 hours in the news on Gaza, can you just summarize where we are in terms of the ceasefire and the peace negotiations within Gaza, between Gaza and Israel?
We're in the third week of a 42-day or 6-week process in which every week 3 or 4 hostages are released and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners are released as well. At the same time, every day, some hundreds of truckloads of aid is entering the Gaza Strip, and there is no fighting. I mean, virtually no fighting. So that's where we are. Today is Thursday. On Saturday of this week, we will see another such exchange. There's also working groups are going to Doha, to Qatar, from here and from Hamas to talk about continuing this and possibly discussing the second phase, which is a very difficult phase because it would mean ending the war for a more permanent way that Israel says it's unwilling to do.
I'll try to get this out on Twitter and LinkedIn in the blur of the morning here in New York City. Faraz Akram and Ethan Bronner, the headline is the president calls for Gazan exit echoes in their destroyed homes. It is a visceral set of paragraphs from Bloomberg News and Ethan Bronner on what's actually going on in Gaza. Mr. Bronner, thank you so much from Tel Aviv this morning. I've got green on the screen here. Futures up 11, Dow futures up 31, the VIX 15.83. Let's do this. From the Interactive Broker Studios, we need a Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa Mateo.
And this Business Flash brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses. Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. For new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment, offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. We've got little movement in futures. This is after initial jobless claims came in higher than expected, but still stay relatively low. 219,000 applications were filed last week. Continuing claims, those were higher too. So NASDAQ futures, little change, down about 4. Dow futures right now, up about 28. S&P futures up about 10. The 2-year yield, 4.20%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.43%, and that's up 1 basis point. To commodities, we have spot gold, $2,886 an ounce. We go to Brent crude, $74 a barrel. WTI crude, $71 a barrel. And the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.2%. So much earnings news, we didn't get to other company news. We have another big tech company changing its diversity hiring plans. You have Google parent Alphabet stepping back from its DEI initiatives. And then PayPal removed almost all references to diversity, equity, and inclusion in its annual report to shareholders. And then finally, some DeepSeek news. Lawmakers planning to introduce a bill today that would ban the app from government-owned devices. That would be over concerns it could provide some user information to the Chinese government. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. To earnings this afternoon in Amazon. He is a cloud expert. We had him the other day, just absolutely brilliant, huge value add. Anurag Rana joins us now, senior technology analyst with Bloomberg. That means, if your Mac freezes, you got to go like Control NRT. You got to use 4 or 5 fingers on the keyboard. Anurag is the only one. I'm on the phone. Anurag, help me now. Afterthought needs to get on the computer. Anurag, Cloud 101. What is the cultural difference between Microsoft Cloud, Google Cloud, and Amazon Cloud? How are they different culturally in terms of their clientele?
That's a very good question. And you start with Microsoft. This is an area where before ChatGPT or before OpenAI, bulk of the workloads were coming from existing customers or customers, what we call as legacy enterprises, big banks, retailers that already had a very strong Microsoft footprint using their on-premise products. And they are the ones who are using those in Microsoft Cloud. So we call it a hybrid cloud environment. For Google, a lot of those were startups, mostly with a focus on AI, retailers, because the retailers don't want to work with Amazon. So for Amazon Web Services, it was basically the bulk of the startups in the world with more focused on, I would say, financial services and non-retail clients, although I'm sure there are a bunch of retailers that are working with them as well. So those are the three big clouds for you and kind of their clientele.
What are we looking for from Amazon tonight? What do you think the street's really looking for, Anurag, when we hear from Amazon?
What happened to next day delivery?
Yes, exactly.
That is so gone.
So the two things we are looking for from Amazon Web Services tonight is how are the supply constraints in terms of do you have enough capacity to fulfill the cloud demand that you're seeing? And second, what would be your capital expenditure plans for next year? Because what we have seen is that Microsoft's really come up with a very big number. Google said that it's going to increase their CapEx. Meta said it's going to increase their CapEx. And now all eyes on Amazon, what they're going to say about that.
And Anurag, I'm still confused as to what the street really wants as it relates to CapEx. When Meta increases their CapEx, the stock goes up. When Google increases the CapEx, the stock goes down. How do you think the street's looking at that? Asking for
when Google increased their CapEx, it actually came with slight slowdown in the cloud growth. So I think that is what caused the stock to go down. But part of what we are seeing, both for Microsoft and Google so far in this earnings season, there is some capacity issues, which means you do have the bookings, but you cannot fulfill that demand, mostly because of data center expansion issues. And I think that's where a lot of the discussion right now is, do we have the ability to fulfill the demand that's coming from the enterprises, from the consumer applications?
Paul, thanks for bringing that up. Anurag, is that a bad thing? Isn't it good that business is phenomenal?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Tom. But at the same time, you remember, people don't look out a few years. They really want to, get paid in the next quarter or so. So I think that's really what the big issue is. People go in with expectations. It misses by 1 percentage point, and it makes them nervous. From our endpoint, this cloud infrastructure market has seen its addressable market grow tremendously because of the potential of AI workloads. And I think that really is the big story for us. Whether it takes a year to materialize or 6 months, I think it doesn't bother me at least.
Okay, folks, you're looking at 20 minutes. You're trying to get to 4:20 p.m. How about 20 years? Amazon, up 25.2% per year. Wow. It's up 10,952%.
Yep.
In 20 years.
Unbelievable.
Not 20 minutes.
No, 20 years. Anurag, let's step back here. We've had some of your big tech companies report earnings. Is there a theme that's coming out of this quarter as it relates to big tech?
Yeah, I think the biggest theme is that we are seeing more and more interest in people embracing AI. The question is, do we really have the capacity to do it? And the second piece, where I think we're going to still take about a month and a half to figure out, is what's tech spending looking like on the non-AI side of things? Because we have had 2 years of muted spending. Yesterday, we saw Workday announce some job cuts. We saw a couple of other companies issue that. I think that's really the big focus is, if you're really not going to show me non-AI spending go up, then I want to see margins, which means another round of layoffs.
Should they issue more debt? Amazon is 7% debt. I mean, isn't it a cash flow juggernaut where they could get the best coupon known to mankind?
Yeah, I think, there was a time when all of them were raising a lot of debt because the rates were pretty low. I'm not so sure we are in that environment right now. They can obviously raise however much they want, but from them, I think the operating margin of AWS is really good right now. And I think that is what's supporting, tremendous free cash flow. And the other business, don't forget the digital advertising business that is growing very well for them. They're taking more and more share away, both from analog services as well as other providers, because people go to Amazon.com straight away for searches rather than going to Google and then going to Amazon.
This is huge. I never talk about this. Madison and Wall Street was brilliant on this digital advertising.
Tom, you like free cash flow. Here's a company this year, or in 2024, $45 billion in free cash flow. Going to grow $20 billion in free cash flow next year to $65 billion in free cash flow. Anurag, what do they do with their free cash flow?
See, right now is a lot of investing going back in the business. That is what Amazon does. We really think that's the best policy right now because of OpenAI, Microsoft has a leg up right now. And it's possible down the road, Microsoft may even overtake Amazon Web Services in terms of, cloud revenue. So they really need to be, very aggressive in terms of offering their products and marketing it right now.
Are they going to get work from office, return to office? Is that going to work out for Amazon?
That's a very tough call, frankly. I have a lot of friends in Amazon, and they're just doing it right now. There's not much choice.
Right. He's got the Bloomberg intelligence backdrop.
Sure.
It looks great in a hotel room in Turks and Caicos. Anurag Rana, thank you so much from the Turks and Caicos this morning. Greatly appreciated. Of course, look to our analysis of Amazon's earnings after the 4 p.m. hour. Carol Mance, she had 42 boxes yesterday.
I know.
At her house. She said it was a record.
Yep. Hey, Tom, how about Rich Go? Jeff Bezos, number 2, $254 billion. He's okay. He's doing all right.
They showed his boat. His boat's the size of Pennsylvania.
Exactly.
Literally.
Sailing yacht.
They couldn't turn around. From Philly to Pittsburgh, it couldn't turn around.
No.
He's got this ginormous boat.
Good for him.
I don't know. Futures up 12. They're pretty sprightly this morning. They've had a bit of a bid. I'm watching oil. Seriously, West Texas Intermediate 71.42. Do you got a 69 handle on West Texas? We're not there yet, but you gotta pay attention. The 10-year real yield is 2.00%. That's a wow statistic.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Futures up 12. We got through the jobs report. We got jobs day tomorrow and then on to the Super Bowl as well. Joining us now, she's a charter member of the Delaware Valley Texas A&M Club of Philadelphia. She's wearing Eagles green today. Are you going to quaff a pint with the Delaware Valley Texas Aggies A&M Club for the Super Bowl?
Oh, you know it. We live for football, so last big game of the year here. So definitely, I don't necessarily, even though I'm in green, it is my favorite color, but I don't necessarily have a particular team I'm rooting for.
So, yeah.
I feel like if there's food, beer, it all works. It all works. That's really why we're there.
Now, are you doing a Super Bowl party this year?
I think I'm going to a friend's for.
Okay.
They do a Super Bowl party. That's you don't want to be the one hosting it. You want to be the person that shows up with a 6-pack of beer and high-fiving everyone, and then you get to leave,
Lisa,
and then they have to clean up.
Are you having 40 over, or is it 60 this year?
No, 50.
50.
Yes.
On the stock market, Amy Wu Silverman was brilliant this morning, and her fancy quant word is dispersion.
Yes.
You're just it's like every stock for itself, isn't it?
That's right. So what I like to look at in the index, so SIBO has DSPX in the index in the terminal where you can look and see what yes. So it is DSPX if you want to pull it up in the terminal. So basically this is SIBO's S&P 500 dispersion index measure. So for those listening who want to go pull it up. So what I was looking at particularly earlier this week, coming into the week, was looking at how the implied dispersion of S&P 500 stocks over the next 30 days was near the highest since 2022. So it's come down a little bit from that. But the reason I bring it up is because I was also looking at where the correlations were for the implied move over the next 3 months. So those were hovering near record lows. So the so what of this that I know Tom Keene's going to ask is, what does this all mean? So usually that would be good for stock pickers and active managers. Unfortunately, it isn't right now.
No, because the active managers, Paul, can get it wrong.
I know.
If you
That's
have
right.
dispersion, and you have, not that I would know what a winner is in the stock market, but if you had a winner, you could just as easily get it wrong, right? Look at Merck and BNY.
I know. I mean, we missed that. So is it active manager time or not?
Well, based on, so I actually reached out to Morningstar Direct because they crunch a lot of this in the funds that they track.
Okay.
So I was able to get some of this Excel data. So if you look at basically, and probably not surprisingly for people over the last decade, active fund managers, when you're looking at how more specifically when you're thinking about, obviously, their underperformance. So this is in particular in 2024, just 28% of actively managed mutual funds and ETFs that compare themselves to the benchmark S&P 500 actually outperformed it. If you look over the last decade, it sits at just 17%.
And you're talking with Dean Kernett, who's a
Yes.
friend of this show. He's a macro risk advisor. What is he saying?
So the thing is, when you're wondering about this and wondering, well, would this be the right time for stock picking? In the short run, he was talking about how this is supposed to help people out when it comes for diversification. But then the risk is that if any sort of macro episode takes place, you can see those stock correlations spike back up. That is something that we did see throughout 2018.
Isn't the heart of this is it's a bull market?
It is.
There's been a lot of turmoil, both political and non-political. And there's not the level of exuberance out there there normally is. What's the exuberance? Give me an exuberance function.
Exuberant. Oh, I mean, do you want to bring up Bitcoin and some of those related exuberance of the froth? I know one of your favorites, Tom Keene. But in particular, when you're looking at how low these correlations were, the last time we saw that this low was actually when the indexes briefly peaked out in July. So that's actually kind of what we would have seen then. But obviously that was more shorter term. And in particular, I looked at specific stocks. So looking at NVIDIA and Apple at the beginning of last week, if you're looking at that 90-day correlation between the both of them, they're at their lowest level since 2014.
Do you like it? I mean, at A&M, it was so like, Kenny Chesney, and the old fart was Alan Jackson.
Right.
Did you ever know the magic of the first time you heard Cream play? Like Badge. Ginger Baker, Clapton.
Yes, I mean, of course I know who Clapton is.
Yeah, but did you ever, was there ever that moment? Did you ever have, a record player in your room?
Yes, but I think Randy Rogers was really huge as far as when it comes to Texas country at the time, because there is a difference between Texas country and when you think of the mainstream country music.
Right. I can't take it on this.
I want you to win, man.
Pantera, let's save ourselves with Clapton. Good morning.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
The president wants lower interest rates from Chairman Powell.
You can make the argument that this is a really rich market.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
President Trump signing a wide range of executive orders.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr. Going to get to it quickly. David Rosenberg will join us from Toronto here in a moment. On fire with Rosenberg Research. There's so much to talk about in these tumultuous times in a bull market. Futures flat. Futures up 8, futures up 12. Now futures top of the morning up 16. Dow futures up 7. We're above 45,000 on Dow futures.
Oh, you're right. I saw
it's
that.
It's like recovery
I like round
time.
numbers. I like round numbers.
15.73. Well, I mean, Anurag was great on cloud. Yep. I still don't have a clue what it is.
You're in the cloud, Tom. So you're in the cloud. So don't worry about it.
Where are the data centers?
They're all like in the middle. I tell you, there's a lot in New Jersey.
Really,
driving down to the
data
shore,
centers
warehouses,
in New Jersey?
data centers. They're everywhere. But apparently, that's a bottleneck. Getting these data centers
the
built.
Constraint.
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
what we hear from Microsoft and some others.
I find it hilarious that that's a bad thing.
Then you got to power those things. So how do you power them?
Out on YouTube live chat, George Strait is great and Vince Gill for everyone outside of Texas.
Okay.
I think they're asking for some country. I got to do Brooks and Dunn here one of these days. We'll have to say good morning, everyone. Futures up 15. Good morning across the nation on your commute. Good morning, Canada. As we get to David Rosenberg in a minute on YouTube, stunned at the response internationally on YouTube. We don't care about tariffs. There's no tariff on Bloomberg surveillance on YouTube. Subscribe. The conduit is Bloomberg Podcasts.
Yep.
When they first said to me, I'm like, what? And now with Google mentioning podcasts 3 times in their conference call, it makes sense.
It's a business. It's a real business. It's a growth business. And Bloomberg's all over it with our
Good morning. Thank you for signing up on Bloomberg Podcast. It builds out each and every day. Let's go to the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Yeah, we've got a slight lift to the markets this morning. Busy earnings day before the open, but also you have Amazon after the close with a close watch on its cloud service business. We'll start with NASDAQ futures. A little changed up about 6 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 74 points. S&P futures up 0.2% or 15 points. The 2-year yield, 4.20%. That's up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.43%, and that's up 1 basis point. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, that's up about 0.2%. Want to point out the British pound down nearly 1% at 123.83 against the dollar. The BOE cut interest rates a 0.25 point. To earnings we go. A nice lift for Peloton, up 18%. Cost cuts, that really helped boost profit more than expected, even though its revenue continuing to shrink. And Ford, kind of tapping the brakes, shares down 5%. It warned that profit may fall by $2 billion or more this year. Honeywell reported adjusted earnings per share beat estimates, but its forecast for 2025 profit, that fell short, so its shares down about 3%. And it also announced that it's splitting into 3 independent companies. And finally, Allstate said it expects about $1.1 billion of losses from the Los Angeles wildfires last month. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. We protect the copyright of our guests. We get more calls. I think Ed Hyman and David Rosenberg, more people. Send me the note. Send me the note. No, get it from Rosenberg Research up in Toronto. At 1 p.m. this afternoon, a huge interview. Our Saleha Mohsen, just definitive on Treasury building. She's been in the cash room at the Treasury more times than I have. She speaks with the Secretary of Treasury.
Ooh, that'll be
David
good.
Rosenberg leads his note this morning with comments on the Secretary of Treasury. David, just to begin with, can the Secretary of Treasury single-handedly lower the 10-year yield?
No. One word or less.
There you go. So what do you expect to hear from our Secretary of the Treasury? What would you like to hear from the Secretary?
Well, the assumption is that that Bessent has any real influence on the president. I think that we don't really know the answer to that, but we know that Donald Trump is going to do what he wants to do. So it really comes down to what he says and ultimately what he does and what you think his objectives are. But to me, the most important voice by far is what the president has to say. I don't think Scott Bessent has the same degree of influence on Trump, say, that Bob Rubin may have had on Bill Clinton back in the day. So,
Interesting.
I have tremendous respect for the Treasury Secretary, but I question just how much influence he really has.
We're going to get to this with David Rosenberg. I did a panel with him up in Toronto that was like riveting on the politics of Canada. And I've been reading the Globe and Mail, David Shribman, and others up there. I want to get to that in a moment. You have a headline, David Rosenberg, that's classic David, and it's the bond bullion barbell outpaces the equity market. To me, that's fascinating. Describe the bond bullion barbell.
Well, it's the barbell or the blended return between the two safe havens, which are treasuries and gold, which combined have generated a total return of around 6% so far this year. The S&P 500 total return is 4.5%. And just a reminder to people out there who have ice in their veins and the risk-on momentum trade that's dominating the headlines, that actually, when you look risk for reward, combined bonds and gold have actually been a better strategy year to date, still early on, than the equity market's been. So that was basically the message, is that if you're looking for alternatives, that particular strategy is actually a great stabilizer, not just a stabilizer, but also is adding alpha to your total portfolio.
David, tomorrow here in the United States, we're going to get the non-farm payrolls here. What are you looking for? And how do you think the Fed's going to kind of look at this data?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, the question is not just about non-farm payrolls, but about just the data right now in general. How much influence are they going to have? Because the Fed has already laid down the gauntlet that nothing is happening in the first half of the year. And you remember, you go back a few months ago, we had a ton of rate cuts being priced in immediately. And that's not happening because of all the Trump uncertainty. So I'm not so sure that tomorrow's number is going to have a big influence on the Fed. Of course, the markets will trade around it. We just had back-to-back months, the new Powell inflation indicator. It's no longer, the super core, the CPI X energy X shelter. It's the market-based core PC deflator, which he's discussed several times. And that metric has come in at 0.1% each of the past 2 months. And I think without all the Trump uncertainty, especially regarding tariffs, and you could argue also fiscal policy, although right now fiscal policy is tightening on the spending side, so it's really mostly about tariffs. The Fed would still be talking about cutting rates right now when you're talking about what the trend in the market-based core PC deflator. It's running now on a 3 and 6 month basis right at the 2% target. And this has become Powell's favorite indicator. But they're actually signaling that they're on hold indefinitely. And that's because of all the policy uncertainty that we have in front of us. And we have to wait for that clarity to come to the fore whenever it does come to the fore. But the Fed right now is signaling nothing's going on rate-wise until the summer. So tomorrow's number, I don't think, is going to bear a lot unless, we're going to get revisions to the household survey and the payroll survey. They'll probably show some convergence. We're going to get, the numbers coming off that new population count based on the immigration file or the previous boom in immigration. So the question for me is going to be the big number tomorrow, actually, after we all look at the non-farm payroll headline and the revisions, is how did this affect the unemployment rate? Right. And so insofar as that nudges the unemployment rate up, tells the Fed there's more slack than they thought, and that could, maybe bring marginally the date forward for when they might start cutting interest rates again. But to me, nothing much beyond that.
David, I know in your note this morning you talk about the U.S. trade deficit and a big dent to U.S. growth coming from the widening trade deficit. You're focused on the trade deficit, but I don't think the folks in Congress are. How do you think about the U.S. trade deficit?
Well, I'm looking more at the components. Like we've had a big decline in exports in December, and they're down precipitously 3 of the past 4 months. And what that's telling me is one thing is about the impact of the super strong U.S. dollar. People, I don't think, are recognizing just how much financial conditions in the U.S. have tightened over the course of the past few months. And on top of that, it's also telling me that just how weak the global economy is right now, that we're seeing the export side really starting to not just decelerate, but now contract. So of course it's going to lead to fourth quarter GDP downward revisions to what we already saw from the Commerce Department. But it's telling us something about the state of the global economy, both in Asia and Europe, that it's coming back to hit home in terms of the reduction in exports. And exports have a very powerful multiplier impact on the rest of the industrial sector. And you're right, nobody else is talking about it. So I thought, okay, I guess I'll corner that market.
David Rosenberg with us. We continue with Rosenberg Research. Toronto, thrilled that he's with us this morning. Futures up 16. They advance across the arc of the morning. Here, 19 minutes away from a market open. We welcome all of you on a commute across the nation, across Canada as well. And of course, on YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. Paul and I really humbled by the statistics for January. They let us into the statistics. I have to buy lunch.
Big numbers.
But,
Yep.
They forced me to buy lunch, but, that's fine.
McDonald's is fine.
There we were. David Rosenberg, you and I did this panel up in Toronto. I was shocked at what I perceived as the struggle of the Canadian spirit in Toronto. And I want you to explain the politics right now. I've got CBC here with the Conservatives with 43% of the vote, the Liberals, whoever's going to replace Trudeau, with 23% of the vote. Is it like France where they get together in a coalition, or is it just, in our translation, Republicans versus Democrats?
Well, another great question. It's a parliamentary system here.
But
it's not as fragmented as it is over in Europe. There's really three main parties. And actually, for the past several years, because the Liberals didn't have a majority, the Justin Trudeau Liberals had to team up with the Socialist NDP party to be able to, not have a majority, but have a coalition so that there wouldn't be a non-confidence vote. A few months ago, that coalition broke, and now, of course, we're in a leadership race, and Parliament is closed right now, and then we'll have probably an election sometime, I would expect, during the spring. So it's not as fragmented. I don't think that unless we have a minority government, we're not going to have a coalition. And if the polls are accurate right now, I'm not so sure that they are, because we don't know who's going to be leading the Liberal Party. Mark Carney being an outsider and being hailed, of course, as having all these tremendous global economic and financial credentials, and he's not going to be tainted by the past number of years of failed Liberal policies. He'll be a fresh face. I would expect that if we have this conversation a couple of months from now, Tom, that those polls are going to narrow in if Carney wins the Liberal leadership race, which I think he probably will at this point. But if the election was held today, based on those polls, it would be a Brian Mulroney-like landslide majority for the Conservatives. But I wouldn't extrapolate that, because if Carney emerges victorious, he's going to pack a very powerful punch.
Do you or anyone have any idea what happens in, 27 days? Like it's a 30-day tariff thing?
Sure.
David, do you have any idea what happens in 27 days?
Well, I don't think the tariffs are going to be coming, notwithstanding the, quotes, 30-day reprieve, because we have to look at the facts that are presented in front of us. Last Friday at the White House, when asked if there was any chance that the tariffs on Canada and Mexico would be averted, he said, no, not a chance. They're a done deal. And then one phone call on Monday with Mexico and two in Canada. Next thing you know, no, we got a 30-day reprieve. So remember, he changed his mind as to when he was going to level the tariffs. He still has the power to do that. And so the question becomes why? Because what Mexico... Let's talk about Canada. What did Canada really do? Like, what did we do? What, like a fentanyl tsar? Like, what is that? So we'll have a few helicopters and drones looking over the border. The $1.3 billion of more border security and enforcement. Justin Trudeau already pledged that quite a while ago. So, what really changed? What really changed is that Canada and Mexico moved a little bit. And now Donald Trump can once again claim a win to the U.S. general public. He got a win from Canada, got a win from Mexico, got a win from Colombia, got a win from Panama. So he's just collecting all these wins. Of course, I think that they're inflated, but I think that the bottom line here is that it comes back to the initial question about Scott Bessent about that they want to get inflation down. They want to get so in answer to the question, can he directly get the 10-year note yield down? Well, not directly, but indirectly. Forego all the tax stimulus and keep your focus on the spending restraint right now. Well, that's a help. And anything you can do to reduce inflation expectations will tell me that's not going to bring down the 10-year Treasury note yield. So certainly, he can have an influence from a fiscal policy standpoint. But you have to ask yourself the question, why did Trump change his mind? And why do I think he was never taken seriously or literally? He campaigned on a lot of things, but the biggest campaign message was he was going to unwind the rest of all the Biden inflation. He was going to bring gasoline and grocery prices down, didn't you know? Well, how are you going to do that and then put a tariff on Mexico, which supplies 60% of U.S. food imports, or 30%. Canada supplies 60% of oil imports. There would be a massive inflation shock, even temporarily. And that would work against his objectives. So as I think about it, and I wasted too much time on the weekend worrying and writing about it, it was never going to happen. It didn't happen. And I still have Canadians here are still on tenterhooks about what's going to happen on March 1st. I'm telling them he's not going to do it. Maybe he'll get more concessions and show that I got more wins, but it's to me basically Justin Trudeau had a chance to actually call Trump's bluff, but he didn't. But no, I don't think. I think that if anything is close to 0% probability, I do not think the tariffs are coming in either country, because it's going to work against. It's going to work against Trump's legacy.
I got to squeeze this in 1 minute. David, one of the reasons I'm a Montreal Canadiens fan is at gunpoint, we had a family that we knew called the Great Britons. And we would go up to the Thousand Islands of 2 lifetimes ago, David Rosenberg. And there was this relationship between America and Canada wrapped around the St. Lawrence Seaway and Gananoque up to Montreal. Is that gone?
Well, it's I wouldn't say it's gone, but it's been impaired, at least for now. I don't like the fact that we're booing national anthems. I mean, this is more about half the U.S. population voted against Trump. Like, what are you booing against? It's really about the president. So boo the president. But the reality is that politics will come, politics will go. I wouldn't extrapolate this into the future. But right now, I got to say, Canadians, generally speaking, and of course I live in Toronto, they're feeling really hurt by what's happened. And the thing is that I don't think the tariffs are going through, but the die's been cast and the damage is done. By the way, Tom, not just here, but in the U.S. too, because of the uncertainty that's being implemented into not just the financial markets, but in the economy. I think you're going to find the one thing that's going to be shelved in both Canada and the United States, because of the specter and the threat of the tariff. There's going to be shelving capital spending plans because of all this uncertainty.
I'm out of time. Michael Barr says, get out the hook. David Rosenberg, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. David Rosenberg of Rosenberg Research on his Canada. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Donald Trump participated in the National Prayer Breakfast at the Capitol this morning, joining a more than 70-year-old Washington tradition that brings together a bipartisan group of lawmakers for fellowship.
From the earliest days of our republic, faith in God has always been the ultimate source of the strength that beats in the hearts of our nation. We have to bring religion back. We have to bring it back much stronger. It's one of the biggest problems that we've had over the last fairly long period of time.
Trump will also speak at a separate prayer breakfast at a Washington hotel sponsored by a private group. A split is building between Republicans on Capitol Hill over how to move forward on President Trump's agenda. Senate Republicans have introduced a plan that would delay action on extending the president's 2017 tax cuts until Congress passes a second so-called budget reconciliation bill. More with Bloomberg's Bill Ferries.
A deadline is coming up, and I think patience is running out. The Senate and the House have been at odds, even though they're both controlled by Republicans, as you know, but they've been at odds over how to achieve some of President Trump's budgetary and policy goals here, and it looks like that is breaking more out into the open today, and we'll have to see if President Trump can help make a decision.
Bloomberg's Bill Ferry's finally driving is a mess this morning in New York City and the tri-state area. Snow and ice hit the rush hour. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thank you so much. An eventful Thursday. Claims out. I think it was pretty constructive. The tape is constructive. The futures up 17. We have Mr. Bessent at 1 p.m. with Saleha Mohsen.
Yep.
Here on Bloomberg News. You'll see that on YouTube, hear that on Bloomberg Radio. And we're heading towards a second prayer breakfast right now at the Hilton.
Yes, in D.C.
I wonder if the president has not gone to the White House correspondent dinner. Let's do this. At the Hilton Hotel, the National Prayer Breakfast, the second one of the morning, here is the President of the United States.
All across the country and from all around the world. This is a beautiful tradition. They told me I could do it via Skype. And I said, what are we doing? And they said, the prayer breakfast. I said, I've been there every year. I'm not doing it via Skype. Right? Via Skype. I'm going to be there. It's not that far, it's like about 2 minutes down the road. In fact, it was easier to do this than put up a Skype deal. Just destroy the White House, putting up all that stuff. But now I want to be here with you. And I have been here with you. Thank you. And I do that despite the fact that they say I can't run again. That's the expression. Sure. Then somebody said, I don't think you can. Oh. Now, I want to be with you regardless, and it's an honor, and it's something I've enjoyed. I've actually met some very nice Democrats here. It's true. I have. But this is a beautiful tradition that started with President Eisenhower in 1953, and I wouldn't miss it for the world. After 4 long years, really, they were very long, dark years, in my opinion. It's great to be back at the prayer breakfast, and I hope you all agree it's nice to once again have a president that shows up to the prayer breakfast. And that agrees to be interviewed for the Super Bowl. I'm doing that too. They haven't done it in so long, they forgot about it. They said, oh, but they hadn't done it in years. But I said, yeah, this morning they wanted to know. And I said, yeah, why not? What the hell? You know the way I look at it? They ask you a question and you give them an answer. It's not that hard. But they didn't show up for years, so they were almost shocked when I said, yeah, I'll do it. Why not? But I want to thank our great newly confirmed Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, who's fantastic, by the way, for being here this morning. I don't know is he around? Where is he? Where is he? He's right there. With the lights, I can't. There you are. You are a handsome devil. He's a good-looking guy. He's got an even better-looking wife, I can tell you that. But I want to thank you and Catherine you've been fantastic. I knew immediately, he was running in a group of people, and I spotted him immediately. I said, that guy's a winner. He didn't get the gravitas, because to get gravitas, you have to be controversial and, in many cases, a horrible human being. You get a lot of gravitas that way, and he's a very good human being and very smart. But I said, he is really outstanding, and he's going to do a job with Chris Wright. Two of them, it's like a partnership with Interior and Energy. He's going to have more liquid gold coming out of the ground than anybody's ever seen before. We're going to drive the price down, and everything else is going to follow. So he's one of the really important people. He's a very, very, very great gentleman, was a fantastic governor, by the way, and really did do, and sort of learned the oil business as a governor, because he made made a lot of money, which I like. I like people that make money, because that means they can help us. And they always like me to put in really people that have failed. They want, please, sir, he's made too much money and he's become too successful. They want me to hire people that have totally failed to run Department of Energy. Somebody that lost all his life. I just don't want to do it. I know it sounds nice, but I want to get somebody that was so successful, because we got to bring the country back, and him and Chris are going to be unbelievable. I really believe it. But I want to thank you very much, Doug, for what you've gone through. He's gone through a lot, too. But he was easily approved because he's an honest person. He gave a statement. They read it. They said, thank you. But as well as our co-chairs, Representatives Ben Klein and Jonathan Jackson. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, fellas. Right. Congressman Eric Burleson and visiting dignitaries from more than 120 countries. From the very beginning of our republic, America has always been a nation founded by people of faith and strengthened by the power of prayer and united by 4 simple but very beautiful words: in God we trust. And you all know there was a movement to get that out. I said, no way, don't bring it up. Don't bring it up. I don't want to hear it. There was a movement. We don't want that, because we shouldn't be mentioning God. There was a very strong movement. Just like they don't want to say Merry Christmas, but now they say it. Remember in 2016, I was a whole big part of my campaign. You're going to say Merry Christmas. Well, now they do it again. But we, I don't know if you've been watching, but we got rid of woke over the last 2 weeks. Woke is gonzo. Despite the other side stealing hundreds of millions of dollars to promote woke. Did you see what happened yesterday, where they found hundreds of millions of dollars of money was fraudulently given to newspapers and, I guess, Politico? I don't know, they're here. Good, I hope you're enjoying your breakfast. No, they gave money to all this out of U.S. aid, right? Oh. U.S. AID. It came out. Hundreds of just tremendous amounts of money, had nothing to do with anything. This is a terrible thing that was experienced, but we're catching them left and right. We're catching them.
The President of the United States speaking at the Hilton Hotel in Washington. It is a national prayer breakfast. There are 2 now, one at Capitol Hill, and then I've done the drive. It's more than 2 minutes. He has a little bit of red light and entourage coverage there to get there in 2 minutes. I think it took me 20 minutes to get up north to the Hilton Hotel. 3,000 people in attendance is a typical audience, even larger than that for the National Prayer Breakfast. As you mentioned, selected Democrats and Republicans in attendance this morning. Futures up 17, and the real story here in this great bull market is, once again, worries, angst. Paul, we came in, we were flat, maybe even a little red, and that sort of disappeared.
No, so we had on the economic data front, Tom, a little bit on the jobless claims, kind of generally in line with expectations. So no real big movement there. We're just kind of processing earnings, Tom. Just a huge earnings day today, so we're trying to stay on top of that. Lisa Mateo.
Did she say it was like the biggest earnings day of the year?
Of the quarter, certainly. I think of the quarter. This is the big day today, Thursday.
With the Dow component Peloton reporting. Paul Sweeney with
all on top of that.
Careful take of that earlier. But Amazon this afternoon. Stay with Carol and Tim to really get a full treatment on Amazon and AWS and the cloud as well. On the currency front, thank you, Audrey Child-Friedman, for attendance earlier. We sort of come halfway back. We're 109 strong dollar. We go back on DXY to 107, and pretty moments ago, 108. I'm going to call it a middle tendency here, but the euro critically gives way, 103.67, and off the BOE rate cut, sterling 123.94. And to my question earlier, Paul, the really question is it a race to the bottom with everybody cutting rates except the United States? On a relative basis, to me, that's not a small matter.
It's not a small matter, and it's a big matter for currencies around the world with the DXY, Bloomberg dollar index strength across the board.
We need to get the markets open here. Jobs day tomorrow, but far more important, the markets. And Lisa Mateo.
For investors to sift through before that, let's get to the S&P 500. We'll start there, up 0.2%, 14.6076. The Dow up 0.2%, 88 points, 44,966. And then we go to the Nasdaq right now, up about 0.1%, 33 points at 19,726. We have the 2-year yield at 4.21%, up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.44%, and that's up 2 basis points. Finally, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.2%. Want to point out the British pound down 1% at 123.94 against the dollar. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
With us right now, Chief Strategist, Interactive Brokers, Scott Bessent. Way too short a time, Scott, this morning. Let's get right to it. Is there an exuberance out there in this bull market? Is there a measured bull market exuberance?
Good morning, Tom. Yes, there is, at least among small to mid-size investors. We basically, the way I see that a lot of our flows go is the bigger the dip, the more it's bought. And you know, last week, for example, there was a lot more buying in Microsoft than there was in Meta. Because Microsoft dropped and Meta continued to rally.
I have to interrupt and apologize. I said Scott Bessent because I've been listening to Pantera.
Oh, okay.
That's
that
why. Steve Bessent, good morning.
Steve, how do you think about it here? I mean, you talk to your Interactive Brokers customers. They had 20% returns plus in 23 and in 24. How do you set up 25 for them?
Well, see, what's going on now is they know what's been working for them. Okay. And literally buying every dip, following every trend has been a winner. And so you can't tell people not to do something that's been working for them. And far be it from me to do that. What I do try to impart is trends don't last forever. Trees don't go to the sky, et cetera, et cetera. And so maybe you want to be thinking about being opportunistic and hedging when things are cheap. I'm looking for, for example, at Amazon earnings, how they're setting up, how the options market's setting them up for tomorrow. And the implied volatilities are actually lower today than they were a week ago, which is odd considering you have earnings coming out tonight.
Well, we have the VIX here. Tom keeps us on our toes here on the VIX. We're below 16, 15 and change here. Does that surprise you given what's been happening out there?
Yes and no. Again, that's part of like the whole trend is the VIX is mean reverting to some extent, but I think people are very quick to sell it off. It's quick to rally and quick to sell off. I think right now it's a little disingenuous to think that volatility will just be calm for now because there's too many moving parts going on, whether it's bonds, whether it's foreign policy, et cetera.
Is there an exuberance in leverage or margin or loans out of portfolios? People talk about a wealth effect out there. Part of a wealth effect is I can't lose, I can do margin. What do you see, and certainly within the confine of Interactive Brokers?
If it's leveraged, people like it. So, for example, NVIDIA is the #1 stock on our platform, as you would expect, but NVDL is among the most popular too, the double levered ETF. Same for TSLL. For example, NVDL a week ago Monday traded 90 million shares. That's kind of crazy when you think about it. TQQQ often is more popular than QQQ because, again, why not? If you like it, why not triple up on it?
We're running out of time here, but the dumb question of the day. If I buy the double leveraged NVIDIA and I buy it on margin, is it then the triple leveraged NVIDIA?
In theory, some of I don't know the specifics on margin. Some of them are not as marginable as an individual stock. So I don't know that offhand.
You don't know the specifics. Yeah. Lisa, do you want to chime in here? Your kids are on the couch trading.
They're on the couch trading.
They're trading Interactive Brokers on the couch.
Just 20 seconds. You mentioned ETFs. How much your clients are they all in on ETFs?
No, I mean, for example, we do see them buy like VOO. They buy VOO to hold. They trade SPY to trade. There's a lot of trade. We have trading very trading oriented customers.
Gotcha. Steve, we got to run here. It's too important. The Dow equivalent's up 24%. Peloton, did you see this coming?
Sure, absolutely.
Steve, do you use Peloton?
I do not.
I do not either.
Power user. I mean, it's but this is a stock that's just been brutally underperforming. But it's up 25% here today, Tom, just on some signs of life out there with their subscriber base.
I'm just imagining double leveraged Peloton.
Oh, yeah.
That means that means you pedal twice as fast, right?
Jen Sherman. Big shout out to Jen Sherman.
Who?
She's one of the instructors there. Who's my gal? She's a Jersey girl.
Can we get her on the show?
Oh, sure.
Okay, that'd be good. Dow up 88 points. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, we've got a little lift to the markets. This is on a big earnings day that includes Amazon. Amazon shares actually up about 0.5%, but it's also on the run up to the big jobs report tomorrow. So let's start with the S&P 500. Up 0.1%, 10 points. Dow, a little change, up about 35 points, with the NASDAQ up about 11. The 2-year yield, 4.21%, up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.44%, and that's up 2 basis points. With the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up 0.1%. Shares of Qualcomm, they are lower this morning, down 5%. An investor concerned that demand for the devices will start to cool. Then we have Skyworks Solutions, down 26%. It's a chip supplier to Apple, saying its competition in the industry is intensifying. Apple shares, they're a little changed. And we go to Ford. Ford down 6%, warning that U.S. tariffs could weigh on its profits. And finally, shares of Honeywell down 4%, saying it's going to split into 3 separate publicly traded companies. That's following some pressure from Elliott Investment Management. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much, Lisa. I greatly appreciate it. This is really, really cool. In 2020, the World Economic Forum, the Davos people, sort of singled out these people, a bunch of young kids, and said, Paul, you don't need to go to a lunch and get a tombstone and get an IPO done in a red herring, as they say. There's a different way. And Equity Zen really helped invent the entire thing of going private. This is Atish Davda and Phil Haslett, and just trying to piece together something that to me is completely foreign. We have one of their experts on right now.
Absolutely. Brianne Lynch. She's head of market insight for Equity Zen. I mean, Brianne, just since September of 2022, the S&P 500 is up 71%. Back in the day when I was in the business of IPOs, I would have pushed 1 million IPOs out with that kind of market performance. What's wrong with the kids today? How come we don't see a more robust IPO market out there?
It's a great question, and thanks for having me. And I think it's something that, we keep saying the market's right, exactly to your point. Why aren't these companies going public? And I think the big thing is these companies have so much capital available to them that while they're private, that if they're a leader in their market, they really don't need to go public. You can think about OpenAI. It's rumored that they're raising a $40 billion funding round now. Wow. That's more than all of the IPO proceeds in the U.S. Last year alone. So, a single company raising that much capital, and certainly they are an outlier. Not every private company is like them, but I think the general thesis is that there's more capital available to these private companies, giving them more options. So, this is causing them to postpone the IPO. That being said, the companies that are 10, 15 years old, we think are finally reaching a milestone.
Do you have math, since you've been doing this a while, that shows less of a dispersion of IPOs between winners and losers and an actual alpha pickup?
Yeah, what we've seen is that, if you look at IPOs in general and look at last year, for instance, on average, these companies are trading well. You think of the Service Titans, the Astera Labs, the Reddits of the world. So, Beta there, these are all, of that IPO cohort. When it comes to alpha and the differentiators, I think companies are trying to figure out what is the secret sauce that they have that differentiates them versus other companies hitting the market. And it seems like all of the companies that we're eyeing, or a lot of these companies, are figuring out how AI can tie into their narrative and give them that differentiation if it's not a core part of their business.
Yeah, but are people making money going the private path versus what were there, 4 IPOs last year? I mean, we hardly know. Is the mathematics working out as you go back to your founding at Equity Zen in 2013?
Yeah, so what we've seen is that growth equity type return has really moved to the private markets. You think of Amazon when they went public, someone who invested in their IPO could have made over 100 times their principal. And because these companies are now growing to be multi-billion-dollar companies while they're private, that upside in the public markets is a lot more questionable. So what we've seen from investors on our platform is that when they are investing pre-IPO and investing in these companies in their later stages, they are able to achieve on average, that type of growth and, that return profile that's really more questionable now in the public markets.
Hey, Brianne, when we listen to the Jamie Dimons of the world, the Brian Moynihan's at B of A, they're talking about 2025 being a pretty robust year for their investment banking business. What's the outlook for IPOs in 2025?
Yeah, we think this is going to be a bigger year for IPOs. When you look globally, there's over 1,200 of these unicorn companies, so companies valued at over $1 billion, in aggregate worth over $3.7 trillion that have been sitting on the sidelines for the last 2.5 years. And if you think about it, in 2022, 2023, the market wasn't really there, wasn't warm to IPOs, and certainly the public market let these companies know that they weren't interested in these growth at all costs stories. They wanted to see profitability and a mix of the two. So more companies, I think, took the past few years to get to those milestones. And now we're seeing certain players in the fintech and other spaces ready to go.
Brianne Lynch, thank you so much. With Equities End this morning, the Dow up 48 points, SPX up 0.3%. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Trump is attending his second prayer breakfast right now. Trump, at a private location in Washington, D.C., took aim at what he called the woke movement.
I don't know if you've been watching, but we got rid of woke over the last 2 weeks. Woke is gonzo. Despite the other side stealing hundreds of millions of dollars to promote woke. Did you see what happened yesterday where they found hundreds of millions of dollars of money was fraudulently given to newspapers and, I guess, Politico?
Earlier, Trump participated in the national prayer breakfast at the Capitol. Today is the last day for federal workers to decide whether to accept the buyout offer extended by the Trump administration. At last check, at least 40,000 federal workers had signed up for the buyout, or about 2% of the workforce. Meanwhile, Democratic lawmakers and activists gathered yesterday to protest the Elon Musk-led Department of Government Efficiency outside the Department of Labor in D.C. Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania told the crowd that it may be overwhelming, but that people should keep speaking out.
Do not fatigue. These are not normal times. What is going on is corrupt. It is cruel. It is chaotic. It is lawless. It is unconstitutional. And that's the point.
Musk and his team have gained access to the Treasury Department's computer network, causing alarm among critics. Criticism continues over President Trump's call to remove Palestinians from Gaza and have us take over and level it out. Palestinian officials and others say Trump's plan to remove the displaced survivors amounts to ethnic cleansing. Trump, in a Truth Social post this morning, says the Gaza Strip will be turned over to the U.S. by Israel at the conclusion of fighting. Trump went on to say no soldiers by the U.S. would be needed. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Jobs Day tomorrow. It's going to be interesting. We've had like 3, 4, 5 interviews are all say the same thing. I go, we're going to go beneath the headline date at 8:30. Baloney. The revisions, plural. It's not just the 1 month, 2 month revisions. There's other revisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So we take a look at the revisions. We take a look at the absolute number. The survey number, Tom, is 170,000. The whisper number, as per WHIS on the Bloomberg terminal, is 197.
So that's up, because you said 195 yesterday.
Yep, so it changes kind of real time here. WHIS is the function on the Bloomberg terminal. 44,900
on the Dow. And, I'm looking, Paul, just the last 4 or 5 days, it's like, oops, the job market's pretty good.
Yeah.
I have no idea what to expect.
Yeah, we had the JOLTS number come down earlier this week here, which kind of just another sign that the market's tightening a little bit. But we'll see. But we still got 4.1% unemployment rate. I mean, I don't know. In my lifetime, that feels like full employment to me. So we'll have to see. So what we hear from some economists is the firms, they're not firing in any kind of size, if you will. There's certainly some headlines. But they don't appear to be hiring that aggressively as well. So a little bit of
We're
a
just
tightness
noodling at 4.1% unemployment. We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so chaotic now. there's only one person we can turn to, Vince Signorella.
Oh boy, that's coming
literally,
up.
there's no one else we could talk to.
He tracks. You know what Vince Signorella does, Tom, as you well know. He just talks to traders all around Wall Street all day. We pay him to get on the phone.
Wall Street.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's happening on the various trading desks? Equities, bonds, commodities, currencies. He talks to all of them. So.
Do you know what he named his Grand Banks? He had a 49-foot Grand Banks.
Did he? Nice.
Mac Truck.
Oh, okay.
Because that was a spread he was making as a trader.
Back in the day,
he was making 3 points on everything. We're going to do that here in a moment. Right now, green on the screen, the Dow up 38 points.
In studio. Oh, my goodness.
It is. Bloomberg surveillance.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney with Lisa Mateo getting you through the morning. Will there be an Alex Steele appearance today?
No, Alex is off today. We have the John Tucker sitting in for Alex Steele.
And
how about that?
He's surveillance congestion
With his
tax
scarf.
correspondent with Michael Barr. Just said they were reporting about it.
So people were worried about this congestion pricing will reduce traffic into Midtown Manhattan, hurting business. Doesn't seem to be the case.
I don't know. I think the answer is the jury's out, and good people are collecting good data to come up with it. Joining us now, not enough time ever for Vincent Signorella, with all of his work at the Wall Street Journal for years, and of course with Bloomberg and Bloomberg Markets on foreign exchange. You know, I look at like the trading movies. There's the Big Short, Barbarians at the Gate. But the one that you lived was the China hustle. I mean, explain to me trading right now. Is it the same as in the old days?
No, I wish. Basically in the old days, you had voice brokers squawking prices over something just similar to this, really. And markets would disappear. And the only people who knew where markets were market makers. So I, at the time, was working at a market making bank, and you literally had to provide liquidity to not just customers, but the other banks. So there was a relationship that you had with all the big banks, and you made markets to each other. When those markets would disappear, you had a couple of seconds to pull a price out of the air and fingers crossed hope you were right. And you either guessed maybe 30, 40 points higher or 30, 40 points lower. And you could see swings. I mean, I remember a day we saw the dollar mark swing 10 big figures 3 times.
So when you watch billions.
Dollar mark.
Yeah, I mean, this is, back Deutsche Mark and Lebanese pound, which nobody will believe.
True.
When you watch industry, what do you think of the Young Turks and the TV show industry?
They're just staring at screens. I mean, a friend of mine is the...
Those are Bloomberg screens. Be careful.
Yeah, not all Bloomberg screens. They're staring at trading screens. A friend of mine is a head of IT for one of the big hedge fund shops. And I said to him, you should get your guys to turn me on and squawk. And he just laughed. He said, they don't even talk to each other. They're literally just sitting at screens, staring at screens, and they keep the temperature really low to keep them awake, essentially, so they freeze them, and they just stare at screens and tap and type and program and trade.
Wow, interesting. Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index. I mean, 1,300.
Yeah.
I mean this is a bull. I mean, bull market for the dollar. Like, is there anything that upends that?
Yeah, I think so. I think if we get tariffs, eventually you're going to see a big change in the current account deficit. We're not going to see that much of a dramatic trade, I think, of the trade deficit, certain spots, but it's not going to really affect it,
in a big, big way. And when you see those kind of things, and you're going to see the inflation and a drop in real yields, because inflation will probably eat into where interest rates are, dollar will probably roll over a bit. It's not going to collapse, but I think the bull run will probably stop.
One of the things that Vince and I agree on, besides good cigars, is the basic idea that VAR was invented by evil people to justify their existence. When you hear a major bank trot out their VAR, their value at risk algorithm, do you still respond the way you and I used to respond years ago?
I always thought VAR was invented by the accounting department to keep me from taking big positions.
Yes.
And I had many conversations with my controllers who would come and tap me on the shoulder and say, "You're over your VAR limits," and I'm like, "Go away." You're curbing my profits is what you're doing. I had an old trader once say to me, "A hedge is nothing more than curbing your profits, basically." So. Limiting your profits.
Fortunately, it's a short block, so I'm not going to get myself in trouble. Vince Signorella, thank you so much. We don't see you nearly. Can we get you returned to office? Can we get you in 6 days a week?
I'm working on it. I'm talking to his people. We're talking to his people.
I don't know about 6 days a week.
Okay.
We're talking
Vince
to his
Signorella,
people.
thank you so much. What a great show today. Thank you to the control room and all the staff here for just moving around, particularly with the president in Washington. We survived Pantera. We can always live with Van Halen. Good morning.